to Lansing if you're not from here, and if you are, then you're very familiar. This is an awesome space. So I know Pat Gillespie is here somewhere in the back, and I want to throw up a thanks to Pat. This is the space where the day that I won my election, this is where I had my election party, and then a few months later, in one of the weirdest days of my life, this is where they released the Shore Style beer. So being a mayor and standing up here holding a beer that's unusual for a politician, but I got to do it. This is one of the awesome new spaces here in Lansing. We have a lot going on. So I'm excited to talk about what we're doing. I'm excited to hear about things throughout the state. And again, I'm excited to have Infrastructure Week here. This is Lansing being national. We are nationally being recognized, and we're proud to be a national player. So I look forward to the conversation discussion today, and I appreciate Infrastructure Week being here. So thank you everyone for being here today for the conversation. All right. I continue on. So we're leading off with a panel of mayors. So I get to be on that panel. I'm not going to introduce myself. You know who I am. But I do want to introduce my fellow mayor. Bobby Hopewell is the mayor of Kalamazoo. He's been there for 12 years. He is a mentor of mine as a mayor. We've been friends for a very long time. But when I came in, he is someone who has helped me out significantly. He is a state national leader. So I do want to invite up my friend, Mayor Bobby Hopewell of Kalamazoo. And to keep us honest and to ask us questions, Bob Trezise is going to be our moderator. If you don't know Bob, he is the CEO of LEAP, which is our economic development agency here in the Lansing area. It's not just Lansing. They do work for Lansing. They do work for this whole region. And LEAP has been a tremendous asset for us in the city. And Bob is a fantastic CEO, director, and a good friend, and somebody who's truly concerned about Lansing area and about Lansing itself. So Bob, why don't you come on up and do some grilling here.
Yeah, my hometown, our hometown, Lansing, Michigan. This place rocks, and it's a pleasure to be here today with two great mayors, because I do love Lansing, but I have to say my daughter's a junior down in Western Michigan in Kalamazoo, and she, in great part, as we talked before, but selected Western Michigan because she fell in love with the city of Kalamazoo. Just another example of how many multiple ways I think that cities, provide an introduction to so many different facets of our lives, and so I'm so pleased to be here today. Just so everyone knows, I did advocate strongly that the three of us at first this morning should all have a can of Shore Style beer and chug it completely down and get really ready for the panel. But that was rejected by somebody with better sense.
Yeah, we got to speak into the mic.
So. Okay.
There we go.
You all missed my joke. Too bad. It was very funny. All right, I'll say a few words. I was asked to say a few words to kind of set the tone of our conversation this morning. Mayor Weaver, we should know, wanted to be here, and she's very sorry she can't be here this morning. She hit a big pothole in Flint and couldn't make it quite down this morning. Oh, God, okay, the second joke. I published a piece in the local newspaper here a month ago, and I'm just going to read the first couple sentences that I think set a tone a little bit. And then we'll launch into a series of questions and conversation with our mayors this morning. But, so here we go. I've never seen anything like this, mumbled my out-of-state visitor who I was trying to attract to this area as I drove him around on our roads. And by the way, it actually wasn't in the city of Lansing, Mayor, just so you know. This is a boundary-less issue, right? Really. But bump, bang, stop, swerving around the whole crumbled lane, on it went. Honestly, a quiet embarrassment grew in me. I could only imagine what this person was politely, silently thinking. What is wrong with this place? Not exactly the critical first impression I was hoping for as we try to attract and convince businesses and people to invest, create, live, and build jobs right here. The debate rages on about how to invest in Michigan's infrastructure, and of course, that costs. But while my visitor left my car to travel back to his home state, I thought, yes, what about that cost? In-migration is really important to our future. New people, attracting people. I've learned this from Mayor Short all the way back to our Michigan municipal days when I was at the MEBC. He was a leader there then as well. People attract business and place attracts people. And by that place, all the literature says that young people are mostly looking for big city environment, diversity of people and culture and things to do. A big, tall region, walkable, dense, nightlife, entrepreneurial, art and culture, university studies, fun. And that requires a lot of people, and nothing really works without people. Not our elementary schools, places of worship, restaurants, malls, money for roads, parks, police, fire. Nothing really works anywhere in the state, throughout our region. But to do really well in our future, in other words, to me, is dependent mostly on great cities like Kalamazoo and Lansing. Great, big, global, diverse cities. So today, we're so honored to have these two visionaries of very major and very wonderful cities, Kalamazoo and Lansing. And with that, I'll get on with a series of questions here. So I'd like to try to start from the top and sort of work our way down. And if I could please ask you first a question about the state that I've honestly always wondered about. So obviously the road formula for Michigan is strange. I don't quite get it. And maybe you two could explain it to me finally. I believe an article by Chad Livingood recently did some research, and he came up with something like the Keweenaw Peninsula, and I love those folks, I've been up there a lot. But they get some $700 per person for road funding, while Macomb County gets something like $180, and I'll bet you it's about the same for something in that. I don't understand why Republicans and Democrats can't see that this is sort of a fundamental low-hanging fruit, that it just isn't fair. I don't know how else to put it. And so I'd like to ask both of you to explain it to me today, why this is and maybe how it might be changed.
Bob is diving right in. You know, the formula is always controversial. When I worked on at the league, you know, there were two sets of thought out there. There's thought one, which is don't touch the formula, just expand the pie and everybody wins. But there's thought two that the formula should be re-examined. I mean, it's a formula that was written in 1951. Population was very different. How do you have those kind of differences within our state? Well, it doesn't. Formula is basically road miles traveled. And the number of miles. It doesn't deal with how wide your lanes are, it doesn't deal with how many, it doesn't take into account the fact that we have many, many more cars on the roads in certain parts of the state than others. So when I was in the legislature, you had Democrats and Republicans in the denser areas who talked about how awful their roads are. You had Democrats and Republicans in the UP who said our roads are fine. We don't need any more money. Well, that's because they don't have as many cars. They don't have the density. They don't have the volume. And I think that's personally, not speaking on behalf of anybody else, I believe that's an issue. And when I was in the legislature, I put in a bill that dealt with trying to right-size that a bit. But it didn't go anywhere because the politics of it are that, again, more than half of the legislature, they don't want to touch the formula because those who win continue to win, and those who don't, usually those who don't tax locally. So in Lansing, you know, I've got a $1 mil tax on our own residents to fix our roads when we have a significant daytime population that doesn't live in Lansing. I have an income tax, so if you work in Lansing and you don't live here, you're paying 0.5%. That 0.5% deals with the police and the fire and the water and the utilities that you get, all part of infrastructure. It doesn't necessarily deal with the millions of dollars in roads. So it's, for me, it's patently unfair that we have many, many visitors, which we love. Please come back, spend money. But our residents are getting 29% of the formula, and the counties are getting 34%, the state is 34%, and yet we are expected to have better roads. The last number I'll throw out there is that we have, in Lansing, we have about a $250 to $300 million need to fix our roads right now. And we get about $10 million a year. My residents are stunned when they hear that. We get about 7 or 8 million from the state. We have our own millage, which does another 2 million. And then we are resuming, last year we resumed sewer separation. So when you separate storm and sanitary, we're bonding for millions and millions and millions of dollars, because we have to do it federally, but the benefit is to do that, you peel off the road, you put a new road on. So we spend about 10 or 11 million and are not really making a dent in the problem.
I don't know what I'm supposed to add to that. You know, sorry. We've made this a political issue. And a road is a road is a road. I understand they're in different locations. I understand that there's different parties on each side of the aisle, and that you got to bring something home to your communities. I get it. But we know it's not working. Bottom line is we know it's not working for Michigan. It's not working for our economy. It's not working for placemaking. It's not working for tourism. And so somehow I think we're smarter than this. The state that really invented manufacturing, innovated our way to creating a new dynamic for the world in regards to how you get around. Moving from one end of our coast to the other end of our coast, we did that here in Michigan. We were innovative. And we can't figure out how to fix our road. Us. Makes no logical sense to me. A formula that doesn't work, if it doesn't work, then you fix it. You dive in and you fix it. I would love to have $10 million. We don't get that in Kalamazoo. We're a little smaller than you. We have $70+ million worth of challenges with our infrastructure. And we can just talk about roads for a minute, or we've been talking about roads, but we're talking about sewers and infrastructure under the road. I have wooden water pipes. We dug up wooden water pipes in our city. We're going to talk about that, I'm sure, here in a little bit, that we're removing pipes left and right. And we have a community that goes into crisis, and we still don't get the importance of the need to fix our infrastructure. It makes no logical sense. I understand we have all kinds of needs in our state. I do. And I'm not a legislator and will never be one. Ever. But I know that we are better than what we are bringing to all of you in the citizens of our state. It's ridiculous. So, I don't know, you asked for how we fix it. You asked that question about which I almost fell off my chair and thinking, oh yeah, we could have the formula for fixing it and it wouldn't ring well with others in the legislature. We just have to be
Smarter, and maybe perhaps focus on big cities, which is an economic development. We're trying to attract new people to the area. I think that should be a focus. Mayor Hopewell, how does it work in a budget process? And then Mayor Shore, so drilling down now more locally, how do you incorporate, or is there such a thing yet to incorporate sort of a broad infrastructure plan into your budget that talks about not just roads, but as you intimated just a moment ago, you know, maybe art and culture, river trail, I mean, other elements, including lead, removing lead as well from pipes. But is it seen in this day and age, placemaking as a little bit of a broader perspective when budgeting season comes around?
Yeah, for us in Kalamazoo, we have gone through a visioning process called Imagine Kalamazoo 2025, and really it's driving everything that we do in our city. This is the most robust visioning process we've ever had. 3,500 participants of a city that has a little over 74,000. So significant for us when in the past we may have received or may have gotten 300 or so people to participate. Listening to our residents, about what's going on in their neighborhood. There are 22 neighborhoods. All of them are developing or have a neighborhood plan. Infrastructure is a part of that plan. how we're trimming trees is a part of that plan. As we go through our budget process, which is about $185 million budget, about 60 or so million dollars worth of general fund dollars, we don't have an income tax. We don't have a special millage. We have had a $3 million plus ongoing current deficit that we're going to be challenged with. We had to get a little creative, a little more creative in how we fund our city. And so we have something called the Foundation for Excellence, and I'm not going to dive into that right now. And we're using a priority-based budgeting process that really looks at all of the things we're trying to accomplish, where they fall in the priorities, what is our hopes and dreams of our citizens, and try to mesh all of that into something that is delivering to the residents of the community. Not a simple task. Neither one of our budget processes are a simple task. So to say that there's some easy formula that we use to determine we're going to spend $5 million on roads and take out 600 lead pipes, which we're going to be doing this year, it truly goes into a priority process that there's a priority budgeting organization that's out there in the universe. We use them, we use their equations, valuations, all of that stuff to get there. And it's all hands on deck. Every department understands that infrastructure is important, whether it's Parks and Rec, whether it's public safety, they understand it. But every department is connected better with everything else that goes on in the city as well. So it's a complicated process, not a simple one, but we get there. We still aren't there enough. $74 million or so, $70+ million of needed infrastructure improvements. I think my deputy city manager's there. I think maybe we are around the $6 million or so that we're able to spend each year and working on it. So the issue's huge, challenge is huge. We need huge solutions.
So I'm gonna do a poll. There's a divide, at least in my city. Bob asked if placemaking and other amenities which draw people to your community count as basic infrastructure. So who here believes that basic, we'll say city service and infrastructure is only police and fire and code and roads and kind of the hard necessities? Who thinks that that's all we should be doing? Who thinks that adding in arts funding and adding in facade improvement and adding in recreation and those to me the amenities, who thinks that's part of infrastructure?
Let me ask it differently. Who thinks that's a part of what our communities and places should have that are thriving and vibrant?
Yeah, see there's your give and take. Last night at City Council, we had some folks testify to say, just do the necessity. Just do police, fire, code, the public safety, and fix the roads and sidewalks. Now my budget has a mix. My budget added added new police. My budget added new code compliance. It added a new city planner for the first time in like 20 years for all of your planning people. But we also increased our arts funding from $150,000 to $175,000. We propose to be the first 100% renewable energy city in the state. We propose several things that some people would call fluff and others would call leading. So it depends on your mindset. And I'm not going to be critical of those who want all of our money to go into police and fire, but I do believe that when you want to grow the pie, you have to be a community that is attractive to people. And we started off with kind of the hard infrastructure of roads, and we're fixing as many roads as we can. We work with MDOT. We appreciate MDOT. They've got several roads in our city that they're taking care of. They mow some lawns for us too, so we appreciate that, Mr. Director. But we're not limited on the condition of the buildings, the condition of the roads. We released, in my State of the City, we released kind of a new forward-thinking campaign, and we called it My Kind of People. And we talked about the people of Lansing and who we're trying to attract. We talked about Lansing for a lifetime, coming here getting your apartment when you first get here, working for the state or a business or whatever, having a family and moving into the neighborhoods, upsizing your house to a bigger house someday if that's part of your dream, and then downsizing because you don't want to mow the lawn and shovel the snow anymore. So having a condo or somewhere available to you when you get older and you're an empty nester, and having all of those options. And that is not based on the roads or the buildings or the sewers. It is a little bit, but we have to have the parks and the amenities. We just put, it's called a Beacon soccer field, which is it's like a pickup soccer in South Lansing. At the same time, we put money into the only professional soccer team in the state of Michigan, which is playing in our stadium downtown. Again, we have people who say, I don't care about soccer. I don't care about the amenities. Give me more police. And there's a big divide there. And do I want 20 more police officers? Sure I do. Do I want the amenities that bring in people? When I worked for the Municipal League, one thing we talked about a lot is what makes people come to a community, especially young people, millennials in town. Everybody wants a safe community, but a lot of people move to Chicago. Chicago's got high crime, Chicago's got high taxes. Chicago's a cool place to be. And that's why people are attracted there. We all have to, I'm not going to be Chicago and Lansing, I'm going to be Lansing and Lansing. But we all have to have that kind of a mix. So I do think that is, in my mind, that is part of infrastructure. And sometimes leaders have to lead, even when there are people who disagree with you. And I will support their right to disagree with me at the top of my lungs. But I'm going to do what I think is best for my community. I think a lot of you, from the hands that I saw, a lot of you agree with that, which I appreciate.
Going into different facets of placemaking, there is multimodal transportation as an example. Can you discuss in your budgets, in your planning, our walkable environment, scooters, river trails, the dense environment that you both actually done a very good job building, but clearly that's a top priority of younger generation, maybe more specifically, but bus transportation, mass transit, airports, all of these things go together. And if you could each discuss briefly the importance of multimodal transportation in future planning of your city.
Multimodal transportation is huge here in Lansing. We have CATA, the Capital Area Transportation Authority, and they do a great job. We have a 400 miles of road and they provide busing throughout the region, through our city, into East Lansing, campus. We love to try and connect campus with the capital. They do a great job. We rely on it, not just for those who can't afford cars, but for those who don't want to afford cars. We were very welcoming of the scooters last year when they came in. Some communities were not, but we were, because scooters to us was the last mile. So if you're taking the bus, but you have to get to that bus, that last half mile to the bus from your house, you can use a scooter. If you can take a scooter from downtown to Old Town because you're sick of eating at the same restaurants, you want to go to Old Town and eat, or you want to go to Rio Town to eat or visit, scooters provide that avenue. CATA also provides for us a free shuttle. For those who don't know and work downtown, CATA has a free shuttle that goes up to Old Town. It goes over by the stadium, so you get to see and eat at different places in the city. So last summer, my staff and I got on the free shuttle, went up to Old Town and had lunch at Creole. But while we were there sitting outside, we watched 4 gentlemen in business suits scooter up to meet, put their scooters on the side, go in, eat, and a half an hour later, come back out, get back on the scooters and scooter away. That is mobility. It's also carbon, it helps your carbon footprint. The hardest thing in the world to do when you're downtown is get your car out of a parking garage. So if you want to walk up 6 flights, take 15 minutes to get out of the parking garage, drive to Old Town and get a bite to eat, you're probably not going to do it. But if you can hop on that scooter and go up the river trail, again, river trail, an important facet that we have in Lansing. All of this is important mobility for those who don't have cars, but also for those who don't want to use cars. So between our transportation authority, which provides that busing, and all these other options. Now, we're still waiting for the scooters to come back. We have approved a few licenses already, but we're waiting on our good friends at Michigan State to make their decisions. And we're hopeful that they come back. There are a lot of people who push back against scooters. I heard from all the people, I heard from the folks who said, I was walking down the street and someone left a scooter in the middle of the sidewalk. So I told them two things. I told them, one, you can move it. Two, you can call the company and they'll come and move it within 15 minutes. But I said to this person who was a friend of mine who was complaining about the scooter in the middle of the sidewalk, I said, what do you do when the neighbor kid leaves their bike in the middle of your sidewalk? Do you call the bike company? Do you call his parents? Do you move it? Do you put it? What do you do? It's the same thing. We have to have a little bit of common sense, but there are always going to be those who push back, and I get that. And we heard it at the Conference of Mayors. We heard it from the mayor of LA and the mayor of Detroit, and from big city and small city. We're all going through the same thing. We have to use it as a tool.
Mayor,
How many of you drove here today? How many of you rode your bike here today? Bike week, I'm surprised at that one. How many of you walked here today? So what we're trying to do in our cities is make our cities welcoming to all of you. Oh, I didn't ask about scooters, but the scooters are gone?
Yeah, we don't have them yet.
Okay.
Sorry. If anybody's scooted here, I want to know about it.
Yeah, I've seen them in the town. Anyway, so I didn't ask about scooters, but my point being is we're trying to make our systems for everyone. So we have a complete streets policy in Kalamazoo. As we're doing work on the streets, we're also looking at the sidewalks, what the trails are doing in that area where we're repairing streets or reconstructing streets. We've connected our downtown trail to the western part of the city, which leads us from our downtown. You can ride a bike from downtown all the way to Lake Michigan. That's part of our process. Our transit authority, we just worked in partnership with them and our public schools, that all of our high school students, all the high school students will ride the bus for free. The reason we did that is because we know in everything we're doing around shared prosperity that the opportunity to get to a job, to find health care, to get to amazing things that move your passion and interest often revolves around transportation. And it is a gap. It's a huge gap to prosperity. And so when we think about multimodal transportation, when we think about connectivity, when we think about individuals having opportunities in our community, especially to enjoy place, as we've been talking about, transportation is key. And so we take it really seriously, and we have a lot more work to do, as all of us do. We don't have scooters yet. Sorry. We'll work on that for you. Haven't really thought about it. But we're looking at all the opportunities to improve our systems, improve our trailways, improve our sidewalks, improve our roads, and make sure that we have transportation that can get people to what they need to get to be able to survive.
it's interesting. How is growing issues like income inequality and equality in our communities, trying to make sure that everybody, all are participating within our community and our economy? I mean, is that something that is more and more being thought about when we think about distribution of infrastructure, different types of infrastructure? I mean, some of this, honestly, is it maybe generational too, in all honesty, that maybe young people sometimes want different kinds of fund or infrastructure, and maybe older people, like me, I want to, but maybe older people want sort of more of the basics, and, it's no secret at all, the old neighborhood versus downtown sort of, arguments that we all live through. How do you guys reconcile all that?
I want to push back. I want to push back a little bit because to me it's funny that the young people, and we'll call them the empty nesters. You're almost there.
Yeah. I never believe
The young people and the empty nesters, they want the same thing.
Yeah.
They want the same thing, right?
Okay.
They want a walkable neighborhood or a neighborhood walkable community. They want to live downtown, or they want to live somewhere where they can walk to the grocery store. Now, if you're 18 to 25, maybe you're looking for a bar that starts at midnight. And if you're an empty nester, maybe you're not, but they both want walkability. So I think kind of the bookends are looking for the same things. When we try and create a vibrant downtown, when I create a stadium district, when we create a marketplace, we're working on hundreds of new housing units downtown, or in our stadium district, or in Rio Town, or in Old Town. When we're working on those, that's not, in fact, that's more likely to be the empty nesters because they're more expensive. So when you look at a market rate condo or apartment, it's more likely to be empty nesters. Now we want to have, the so-called affordable or workforce housing for the younger people to live there also, because we want to attract them all. And then kind of families are in the middle, and a lot of the families are in the neighborhoods. Now sometimes you do see a pushback between the neighborhoods and kind of that urban core. And that's a legitimate challenge. Everybody wants to serve their own. In Lansing, you have a park 10 minutes walkable from wherever you live. We're proud of that. But yeah, we see some back and forth. We want to make sure that there's community policing throughout our city, but we also want to make sure that we're supporting the ability for people to live in a walkable neighborhood. So it's a give and take.
Yeah, if you think about it from a complete street standpoint, and I can't agree with the mayor any stronger, we are trying to make sure that there's options. I think it's about options. So if you're about cycling, if you're about walking, if you need to drive your car, if you're about using an Uber or someday autonomous vehicles, we need to be thinking that way, because the choices you make may differ every single day, whether you are 20 years old or you're 50 years old. And if you think about it from a prosperity standpoint, at some point in time, my 83-year-old mom is not going to be able to drive. What options are there for her to get around? At some point in time, some people say I shouldn't be driving. I won't be driving. So those are the things I think we're trying to think about it in that way. It's truly a place-making connectivity. The Michigan Municipal League, who has been, I think, the strongest drivers of place in our community, have been talking about how do we ensure that our cities are thriving and vibrant, and transportation and this whole generational thinking regarding transportation. They've looked at this, they've talked about it. So the mayor's correct. I think there's more convergence from a generational standpoint than divergence. Really.
Let me ask both of you, as we're winding down here a little bit, the big question. Both of you clearly are visionaries in the here and now, but let's talk about 2040. What does each of your cities look like in 2040 from a comprehensive infrastructure perspective? Mayor Bobo.
So for us, a number of things. No more lead pipe. None. Zero. Gone. Not even talking about that. I don't want to hear about that. Not just lead, but I'm going to say not just lead pipes, but certainly lead in our homes. We know that that's even more of a challenge. In our community, we have some flood zones that are significantly problematic for economic development, for our neighborhoods. We have to remediate them. Find a way that people can live and thrive where they built their home. Neighborhoods that are thriving, so we'll have all the roads being beautiful. All these wonderful two-way streets or one-way streets that we have are disappearing. Anybody want to get rid of one-way streets at all? Or at least some of them.
Not many hands.
Wow. Okay. Well,
engineers.
You can have ours. You can have ours. We just had the opportunity with MDOT to do a jurisdictional transfer of a number of our one-way streets. And we are hoping to convert those to two-way where we can and where it makes sense. That has been on our agenda for a long time. And I think if you have those things happening, if we're investing in infrastructure, if we're removing barriers for families to live in their homes and be healthy, I think that moves prosperity. And we talk about prosperity in Kalamazoo a lot. I mentioned the Foundation for Excellence. So you said one of the things I want to see in 2045, we have a philanthropic partnership where I've got to raise $500 million to sustain our city in 3 ways. Deal with our tax reduction that we gave to our citizens, to deal with a budget deficit that was concurrent that I mentioned. And then the largest part of that, or the main part of that, is to move that vision that we've planned for our community forward to the tune of about $10 million a year. That's getting at infrastructure, that's getting at neighborhoods that are complete streets work, trailways, utilizing our river. We will be a thriving community in 2014 with all the amenities that attract everyone that leave Lansing to come to Kalamazoo. That's my goal.
The challenge is on, Mayor Short.
That's hard to follow. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. You know, by 2040, by 20 years from now, you know, I would love to see many of our challenges that we face now, at least down the field, if not fixed. You know, we don't have lead pipe problems in Lansing. We're one of the very few communities that was able to eliminate it, but lead paint is certainly an issue with older housing stock, so that's an issue. You know, the roads, I figure, hopefully in 20 years we've got a solution, and we're at least, you know, 15 years down the road. But in 20 years we'll have to look at fixing them again. So this conversation will come up again. But our challenge and our drive is to grow the city. So growth is economic development, growth is neighborhoods, growth is options. We released a Lansing Forward 2030, a Lansing 2035 plan, where we talk about livability. So that's all housing options, whether you're, again, you're new to the city, you're a young talent, you're a senior, market rate, workforce housing, affordable housing, having the options. Diversity, Lansing is one of the most diverse cities in the state, and we'd like to continue that. Our kids speak 47 different languages in the Lansing public schools, so we'd like to continue to support that. We have an immigrant and refugee center, so we will continue to grow that. So working with our education, I'd like to see our schools continue to increase in scores. You know, there was a time there where nobody went to the Lansing public schools unless you had to, and that has changed with our pathways. We just passed a large bond, second one last Tuesday. So I think that is going to pay dividends with fixing our buildings. So I think growth. Seeing that the city has grown, our population was 114,000 at the last census. We're now at 117,000. So, you know, the state did not go the right way at the last census, and I think that we will gain population in the new census, and we'd like to see that continue here in Lansing. So, you know, we're proud to be the capital city, and we want to continue to provide all the resources and amenities. We are aware that at any time now a recession could be coming, and we want to be as recession-proof as we can be. So we want to keep developing and keep looking, financing things. Lansing has the benefit of being the state capital, so we have a lot of government jobs. So we are somewhat, I wouldn't say recession-proof, but we'll continue to have a government regardless, which is a good thing here. So you know, making sure that we most of the time. So we want to continue to see growth. If 20 years from now, I expect I will not be in this chair any longer. I'd like to see that we made positive impact and growth. Again, but that's a good chunk of that is infrastructure, but it's also human capital as well as infrastructure to continue to recruit that talent that we need here, whether it's, you know, teachers or building trades or business owners or state government workers. So we'll keep working on it.
Well, I'd like to say that my beautiful, wonderful 20-year-old daughter chose to live in Kalamazoo. I'm at the university. My beautiful, wonderful 23-year-old daughter chose to live in the city of Lansing, where she lives now, and is having a wonderful experience. And I think that our state can have a very bright future, as you feel, but the key is cities. And I really deeply believe that Kalamazoo and Lansing have been great leaders, and with great mayors providing that leadership. On behalf of all of us today, thank you for your vision and for sharing some of your wisdom with us this morning. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
You know, it is said that place is space plus memories. And when we think about the work of cities, They really create for us an environment to create memories, to enjoy life, to pursue happiness. Literally, cities are laboratories of innovation. And you could not have had two more visionary and capable leaders to come before you than our two mayors this morning. Now, you're also going to hear from your from your governor a bit later. And in between, you're going to hear from a number of other distinguished leaders. And I'm just pleased to be a part of the number. Michigan was the Silicon Valley for Silicon Valley. Michigan gave birth to the middle class through the work of the automotive industry. Michigan, a muscle, an engine of innovation. Michigan, with all of its Great Lakes, with all of its beauty, with its quality, leaders in Congress, Senators Stabenow and Peters, and all of the other members of the House delegation, all with an opportunity now to work with an administration that welcomed the Democratic leaders to the White House just a few weeks ago. Words from the speaker that came forth from the meeting: whatever we do has to be big and bold. Words from the president coming from the meeting: hey, I like that number that you've been talking about, 2 trillion. The good thing about this big and bold and $2 trillion effort is that it could possibly lift the sights of these leaders beyond the trite and the trivial and the political that sometimes bogs us down when we have to make important decisions. I can actually remember 25 years ago when another president lost the Congress and had to contend with an upcoming election and the ever-present oversight hearings and a lot of other things that would occur in between. And over a 6-year period, that administration, working with the Congress, gave us the longest economic expansion in the nation's history. 22 million new jobs, a balanced budget, and a surplus at the end. So while these are difficult times, and while to watch television and to look at some of the shows, you could think that there is no possibility that these parties can come together, I just ask you to think about 25 years ago. It was the last time that we increased the gasoline tax for transportation. And if these sides are to come together, they've got to figure out a way to pay for transportation investment. It was also during that period we recognized that we couldn't rely solely on an increase in the gasoline tax because the vehicles that you were starting to produce here in Michigan, clearly as a part of the Partnership for a New Generation Vehicle, vehicles that could actually talk to one another and actually talk to the roadways. You know, we actually tested the first intelligent stretch of highway 25 years ago. Probably the most significant thing as it relates to transportation was to allow GPS to be available for civilian use, and that is what makes it possible for us to move towards autonomous vehicles. And a lot of people today are talking about G5, or 5G, I'm sorry. And that's the addition to the internet that takes it to the 5th generation that allows all of us to have continuous communications through these little handheld devices that can fit in the pocket of a jacket or in the pocket of a pair of slacks. And so, it is important for us to have gatherings like this where we bring business and government together, where we bring mayors and governors together, where we bring individuals like yourselves together to think about imagining a new Kalamazoo, or to think about Lansing 2025 or 2035 and its plan for the future. Because just as with the leaders who gathered at the White House, and as with all of us who gather here today, once the mind reaches forth to embrace a new idea, it can never return to its former state. Now, we can act like we haven't met and we haven't agreed to big ideas and bold concepts, but there's no way that we can go back and, with our own consciences, not deal with the fact that no, we gathered and we envisioned a new day, new opportunities, where all of us might come together in a way to continue America's trek, that long trek, to create that more perfect union. And so I'm very, very pleased to be here today with Patrick and all of the other individuals representing Infrastructure Week to have a dialogue with you about what's important to you. I want you to know that Secretary Chow was in that meeting with the President and with the leaders of the Democratic branch of the House of Government. And I'm sure that she was thinking about all that she could do working with you with that $2 trillion. I'd like to just maybe mention that when I was Secretary, one of the greatest joys I had was to travel from Buffalo, New York to Laredo, Texas. 14 days, 14 states, 3,500 miles. To be in meetings like this, Mr. Director, to hear from people like you and others all across the country. And when we came through Michigan, we talked about I-69. And many of you know that that's a roadway that we continue to build on as we move forward. And so I'm happy to be here today. I'm looking forward to the next panel discussion. And I want you to believe that good things can happen in Washington, D.C. But they need to be pushed by you. And I think that the resounding voice that we're going to get from this meeting today is to go forward, think big, think bold, and deliver us an infrastructure package that can take us forward in the 21st century. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to have a series of questions, and we'll hear from all of the panelists, not necessarily on every question, but definitely to get them all engaged with the important issue before us. I'd like to just present to all of them the question of identifying key funding needs in the state and the region at large. We've heard from the two mayors about some of those issues as it relates to their particular cities, but let's broaden it a bit, maybe to talk about maybe other cities or the region or the state as a whole. And Mr. Director will start.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good morning, everybody. Truly great to be here. As everybody knows, there's a huge conversation going on right now in our state about how do we fund our transportation system moving forward. The debate, obviously, is becoming a little bit one-sided because the government's put her plan out there to say, I think 45 cents gas tax in the next 12 months to fund our transportation system for the next 10 years is the way to go. And she's challenged everybody, even those on the other side, to come up with any other ideas on how they think can fund transportation forward. But what we have right now is that there is no other alternative out there. That's really making the conversation a little difficult. You hear from everybody we've met, she and I have been going around the state doing a lot of town hall meetings, is that there is a general consensus among everybody that we do have a road problem. And the question is, how do we solve that problem? And I think that's where we're getting bogged down.
Very good. Let me ask Director Brown, any additional comment on that? Or, I mean, do you think that the governor should literally be debating against herself, or is it incumbent upon the legislature and others with ideas about funding to come forward with better ideas?
Well, that's just it. I think it's incumbent upon everyone to come forward with other ideas and think beyond what we've always done, what we've known, what's familiar, what's simplest. I mean, it's going to be challenging to come up with sustainable funding sources for particularly transportation infrastructure. With, improvements in fuel efficiency, the motor fuel tax, even if you increase it, I mean, it's a path to diminishing returns, no matter how you look at it. At the federal level, I'm encouraged by the fact that there are pilot programs that are testing alternative approaches to funding transportation, such as the vehicle mile tax or vehicle mile fee. There are states that have piloted that approach. Mileage-based user fee is another term that's been attached to that. And there have been some successes experienced in some other states. It's not the simplest approach. It's an approach with challenges, but again, we're going to have to move beyond the comfortable and the familiar in order to get to a path where we have a sustainable funding source for transportation.
Yeah, very good. And Mike, we're going to ask if everyone would speak directly into the mic. We understand that some of those in the back are not finding it easy to hear us. Let me just ask one more question about alternative forms of infrastructure investment. You mentioned vehicle miles traveled. You also put about P3s. I mean, that's something, we'll come back to it, but I thought we should just get that on the table as well.
So certainly P3s are a great approach to P3s are certainly another approach to thinking about how we deliver our infrastructure. And it's an approach that encourages us to focus on the life cycle of the asset so that we're not just building what we can afford today, but we're looking into the future at what it will cost to maintain the infrastructure and to renew and rehabilitate the asset, so that we make better choices up front about what we're willing to pay in order that we will not end up in some dire situation because we constructed cheap infrastructure to begin with. And when you buy on the cheap, you get cheap. But as we talk about funding, it's important to separate the P3 delivery approach from the need to identify funding sources. P3 again is a delivery approach that will often open up pathways to new sources of financing that will enable us to better manage the cash flow availability. But again, it's not a funding source. It's a financing and delivery approach. But in combination with sustainable funding, P3s are a great alternative to consider. And I know it's one that has been utilized in Michigan recently on I-75, which was a huge success. And we look forward to seeing a lot more successes where you utilize P3, design, build, or whatever is the best approach for the particular infrastructure.
Very good. And Mike, why don't we talk a little bit more about some of the major projects in the area that you think would be targeted for the kind of investment that we're discussing. We've touched on a couple of them here, but are there others just across the state?
That is a decision that the department makes. They look at a wide variety of innovative delivery processes here in Michigan. We've used a number of them. I would say our competitive bidding process here in Michigan has been successful. Obviously, across the nation, competitive bidding has saved taxpayers billions, if not trillions of dollars over the years. But we do have to look at different ways to build projects. I think it's important, going back to your original question, though, the Secretary, that both you and the Director have said it, we have to be innovative and we have to look at doing things differently, because doing things the same way that we've done them, obviously we're falling further and further behind. It's encouraging to hear that something may happen out of Washington. We've heard that song and dance before. As you said, it's been decades since something real has come out of Washington as far as significant infrastructure increases in investment. The Director talked about what's happening here in our state with the governor proposing a plan. I think all of us in this room recognize the governor's plan is important because it does address the problem. We would see significant increases in our transportation infrastructure. We have 1,200 plus bridges here in Michigan. Over 10% of our bridges that are structurally deficient. And that's not functionally obsolete, that's structurally deficient. We have bridges that are being held up by temporary supports here in Michigan. And this isn't just a Michigan problem. We're here for Infrastructure Week nationally. Obviously, there are other states that are dealing with this. We're heading in the wrong direction as far as the number of roads leading from good, heading down towards fair, many headed to poor condition. Our percentage is increasing rapidly, and obviously the governor's plan will help to address that, turn that curve. But it's also other areas of our state as well. We have put nearly 6 billion gallons of untreated sewage into our waterways here in Michigan on an annual basis over the last decade. We're the Great Lakes state, and yet we're pumping raw sewage into that greatest natural resource that we have. And so, as far as addressing these issues, it was interesting to listen to the mayors, because talking about $7 and $10 million a year, I'll tell you what, we all drove here on Lansing's roads and they stink. And the mayor is struggling, and the city council here just to keep up. I think they're falling further and further behind, just like MDOT. So we've got to think bigger, we've got to think bolder, because that 25-year plan, whatever we were talking about, 2040, I envision something way uglier if we don't do something about this soon. Boy, that knocked them on their knees, didn't it?
It's quite sobering. Let me come back to you, Mr. Director, and maybe we can hear from you about specific investment, linking specific investments and policies to concrete economic development goals. I know that...
Or asphalt.
Or asphalt. I know that, again, the governor has talked a lot about this, but thoughts from you in that regard?
Well, I think the earlier panel talked about funding, how we distribute money with the Act 51 formula. This is the law that was passed in 1951. And I think, as the two mayors say, it's probably time that we take a serious look at that and see how we reform that system of distribution. But to answer your question, what the governor has decided to do with this new funding is to not run it through Act 51, because a lot of our roadways are in such critical bad condition that we focus and target this new money to those highly traveled roadways with economic significance in the community. And I think that's the right approach that will lead us to start seeing a significant improvement in our roadway condition. Mike mentioned the bridges. We have, as he said, we have about 1,200 bridges right now that are really in critical condition. If you want to see a bad bridge, the governor is going to be visiting Miller Road Bridge on Thursday. It's a bridge that leads into Fort Plant. When you're talking about economic, how we tie this to economic development. This is a plant in Dearborn And this bridge right now is being held up by 405 temporary supports. That is how bad that bridge is. We could not afford to close that bridge because if you do, you cut off every, transportation going in and out of that fourth plant. And the temporary support we put in there only buys you about 4 or 5 years. So in 5 years, we're gonna have to come up with about $50–60 million to deal with this bridge. And that is just not an isolated incident. We have a lot of these all over the state. So the fixing our infrastructure and economic development, I think, goes hand in hand, and you just can't separate the two.
Did anyone travel across the bridge that was mentioned?
They won't go back that way.
It's structurally safe, don't get me wrong, but we just, all we did is kick the can down the road for 5 years, so no cause for alarm.
Well, and listen to the fact that the bridge is connecting economic engines of the state. And it represents sort of the supply chain of those companies that want to get their goods to market and people who want to get to job opportunities. So transportation is clearly much more than concrete, asphalt, and steel. Let me ask, I want to go back to this question. How do you think how does the governor get others to meet her in meeting the challenge? I mean, it's not like she hid the fact that she was going to run on a transportation plan. And she was very clear about that in the election, and she was elected. So how might the three of you offer some additional thought about how she gets others engaged, and frankly, how individuals in this audience, companies and organizations, entities in this audience might play a role in that regard?
Well, I can start. We talked earlier about at the federal level making some bold decisions to a $2 trillion infrastructure package. I think we, the governors, should a model on what the federal level should do. I think our bold decision to put a 45-cent gas tax increase out there to solve this problem once and for all, not kick the can down the road, to me is bold leadership. Because up until then, all we've been doing is playing a lot of shell game, kicking the can down the road, and little minor fixes. If you remember, most of you in the room here, in 2015, the legislature passed a package, road funding package. However, that $1.2 billion, only $600 million of it is committed. The package was passed in 2015. The first $600 million doesn't kick in till 2017. The other $600 million is not going to kick in till 2021. While we're waiting for that other $600 to kick in 2021, a lot of our roads are falling into poor categories. And as you know, once that drops into poor category, it costs you a whole lot more, 4 times more to bring it out of that. So I think again, on absence of another plan out there, this is the right way to go.
Let me go back to the example that Paul was giving about the Ford plant in Dearborn. You take that a couple steps further and you look at our major economic sectors here in Michigan. So there's another example by a GM plant where the transport company won't even take delivery at that GM plant because the road is in such poor condition. It's a perfect example of a public-private partnership because GM's gone to MDOT and said, we'll rebuild the road with you. But then you look at our agricultural sector, our second largest in our state. They have to get their product to market on these roads. And you think about those soft fruits and vegetables that they take in trucks down these roads, and the amount of damage that is happening to those is incredible. We went around the state as the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission and heard about this all across the state. And then lastly, we have this great Pure Michigan campaign. We advertise in New Mexico and California and Washington. And we tell them all, y'all come. We have this great Pure Michigan campaign. We have a beautiful state to offer you. When you get here, you might get a pothole. You might encounter one of our closed bridges because of E. coli contamination, or in other words, fecal matter in our waterways is infecting our beaches. So we're shutting down 25% of our beaches in 2016. But y'all come. You're welcome to come to our great state. Point is the other elected officials in Lansing have to recognize the impact that these roads, that our infrastructure is having on our major economic sectors, and they have to think about it from that perspective. There are hidden taxes that we are all paying because of the deterioration of our infrastructure. And so they have to recognize that we can save on those hidden taxes and yet pay a little bit more at the pump, pay a little bit more on our water fee, pay a little bit more on a millage at the local level, and we will see improvements.
I wanted to go back to something that the director mentioned about the sort of the delay in the availability of the funding that's already been, and funding increases that have already been passed. Similar to the approach that I mentioned with public-private partnerships, where the private sector will come in and take the risk of delivering today, but getting paid over time. So a good example of this was in Pennsylvania, where they did a bundled bridge replacement program. They replaced 350 or so bridges through an approach utilizing private sector efficiencies and expertise to replace a series of bridges, and the payment stream back to the private sector to reimburse them for this program, comes over time as the funding is available. So that might be an approach. Maybe you could do a bundled road program here to address some of the short-term needs.
Very good, very good. Clearly, here you're talking or listening to leaders who are thinking creatively about doing what you can with what you have at a time when you must try to address those issues as best as possible. Let me just talk about the mix of funding that they're talking about at the federal level, because I think that has application here. First of all, you should know that if Michigan moves forward with the governor's plan, you will actually be the 39th state that has moved aggressively on investing more in its infrastructure program. That's since the last time that the federal government moved, right? So the states are actually providing impetus on this front, and what you need is a good partner at the federal level. Can you imagine the interstate as an idea without the federal government taking the lead to make it happen? It wouldn't have happened. And it happened because of a 90-10 split, basically. And then there are a lot of occasions where the amount is 80-20 from the federal state as far as matching. One of the proposals that has been offered at the federal level, at least initially, was flipping that and making it 20% federal investment and 80% state investment. That's not going to cut it. I mean, we really need to step up at the federal level and really be a leader when it comes to giving us the kind of transportation system we need to compete in a new century and to compete with competitors economically that are making these investments in their infrastructure system. And so, not wanting to sort of conclude on a down note, let's talk about maybe some of the success stories. And there are some here. I think that this effort to move a major program is a success story in the making. But there are other things occurring across Michigan that are to be applauded. And the two mayors talked about that earlier. I'm sure that the governor is going to talk about this later, but let's, while we still have just a few more minutes, think of those positive things that you think we can build on that are actually occurring in Michigan, where Michigan can be an example for other states. And if you have other states examples there, because I know that you communicate with your colleagues across the country, feel free to mention those as well. And why don't we start here?
Okay,
And then,
all right. Well, obviously, our evolution of asset management here in Michigan is probably the biggest thing that I see as far as evolutions that are extremely positive for the long-term outlook. Looking at how we can better manage the investment that's available to us, better understand the asset that we have available to us, help the public long-term. My vision of asset management here in Michigan evolves even further in that if we follow the roadmap, no pun intended, of the Transportation Asset Management Council, where we can go online as taxpayers, zoom in like a Google Maps and look at our own communities, our own neighborhoods, and see what state our roads are in. If we could see that same system on our underground systems in the future, that is going to be huge for public support. You cannot garner public support on infrastructure investment overnight. It is a very, very difficult thing to do. But what we have seen through our organization's information gathering is, unfortunately, Secretary, folks distrust the money that they send to Washington, or they distrust how it will be spent. And so that's a challenge for us publicly. It happens. They distrust a little less, but still distrust the way that the money is spent that's sent to Lansing. Folks think it goes into some big white building and disappears and they don't know how it's spent. But they truly have trust in how money is spent at the local level if they truly understand how it's going to be spent. So with the millage, the successful ones that we see here in Michigan are those ones that are laid out clearly to the voters so that the voters can say, okay, I see that the street that I travel down, maybe not my neighborhood, but I see that the secondary artery is going to be fixed, so my route to work or church or whatever it is going to be fixed. That's a good way to look into the future and look at things. But this asset management opportunity that we have now, based on the recommendations from the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission, we're going to be able to look at our water and sewer lines and know that they're in good shape, or maybe not in good shape, and then ultimately support a water fee increase in my community in order to say that I want to fix that stuff.
Yeah, you really touched on a great point there. Public support at the grassroots level is key, and key to generating that public support includes, greater accountability. If they can see where their money is going, if they can see some benefit to the money that they're spending, then they're more likely to approve of and vote in favor of additional measures to dedicate additional funding for infrastructure needs. Another piece that should go along with generating public trust through greater accountability is also increases in public education of what it really takes to deliver infrastructure. Most people don't truly understand how much a road really costs. There's a disconnect between what people believe they pay at the pump, even though I know you've taken measures here in Michigan to increase the motor fuels taxes across the board and normalize the fees generated from hybrid vehicles through standard vehicles and different types of fuels. But still in all, it's incumbent upon all of us who get it, understand how transportation and other forms of infrastructure get funded, to help our friends, our neighbors, to better understand how little they truly pay into the system that provides for road funding throughout the local community and the state at large.
Yeah, you mentioned success stories. I'm especially proud of the partnership that MDOT has developed over the years with all our stakeholders, especially the construction and the consulting industry. I think to be able to educate the public about the need for this funding, you need to have that strong partnership going in. And then on the infrastructure side, I will point to several good examples. Gordie Howe, for as long as I've been in MDOT, I remember talking about this bridge and to see the perseverance to get it to where it is now, where it's actually going to happen. I think it takes a lot of dedication from not just them that being able to work with everybody involved to get it to this level. Deborah mentioned the bridge bundling. As I mentioned earlier, we've identified about 11 to 1,200 bridges statewide. And these are not even MDOT bridges that we are putting together right now, putting a bundling package together. We're going to put it out probably by the end of this year to start chipping away at some of our bad structures out there. I would point to the I-75 project in Oakland County. That's a P3 project, the first of its kind, and also included maintaining that road for the next 30 years. So we have a lot of innovative projects in the pipeline that we are just kind of jumping at the bit to get out. But again, funding is a huge part of this, and I'm hoping that the governor and everybody that has a stake in improving our infrastructure, we are successful in this endeavor, so we can start making some improvements in our infrastructure.
Very good. We've got a few more minutes before we conclude the panel, and I've got one more question, but what I'd like to do is maybe take a second to see if anyone from the audience might have a question or two. I know this doesn't frighten Paul because you talked about your partners and stakeholders, Paul. So if you've got a question of Paul or Deborah or Mike, please feel free to offer it. No question? Okay, let me go to mine then, and I think that'll take us to the end. Chesterton once said that you don't truly love something until you realize that it may be lost. And I think we're all, a little negligent from time to time when we've got those who are close to us that we love and they love us. Those things that we take for granted, like a beautiful, pristine surrounding. All of the wonderful development along the river walk. The wonderful bridges to, travel across that we've been traveling across for decades. The beautiful roadways that take us to grandmother's house. All of these things that we take for granted. And we didn't have to plant the tree that gives us shade. We didn't have to make the tough calls that gave us the opportunities we now enjoy. Recognizing that this moment requires the best of us, that we might be worthy of the best that we've been given. How would the three of you sort of conclude the presentation that we've had and the opportunity that we've had to dialogue with this group? And speaking from your area of responsibility, is there anything that we would ask of? Is there anything that we would suggest that we could give more of ourselves? Is there any greater clarity to give to the urgency of the moment? Just those kinds of questions, and however they might cause you to respond. And so maybe, Mr. Director, I'll start with you, and then we'll just conclude the question.
Sure, thank you. Again, thank you, panelists, and everybody in the audience. It's really great to be here. But the way I would conclude is this. As I mentioned, the governor and I have been doing a lot of town hall meetings. And as we go around the state, what I really believe, there's a general sentiment out there that we have to do something now. That they not doing anything is not an option. I believe everybody out there, all the elected officials, really believe this is our charge to keep. We have to make this very bold decision to fix our infrastructure moving forward. Because if we don't do it now, we miss this opportunity. The cost of bringing it back to the glory days is just going to be so huge. The governor's proposing this 45 cents increase is because, honestly, per capita, Michigan is ranked 46 out of 50 states. We have been neglecting this for a long time, and the longer we neglect it, the more it's going to cost. So I really believe this is the time to do something. Thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, certainly we can all agree that it's time to do something. And certainly, despite the ranking, Michigan is not alone in terms of the level of deterioration of its infrastructure and the criticality of the needs faced by the state and those who travel on the roads and utilize the infrastructure of the state. But I circle back to, I think, where I started from. Aside from deciding and recognizing that there is a need, and we need to step beyond our comfort zones from the old and the familiar and what worked in the past. Certainly, in the short term, additional motor fuel tax fees and what have you are a great start. But we need to think beyond that to what's going to sustain us moving into the future and move towards something that equates the dollars into the system to the amount of the infrastructure asset consumed, towards something that more adequately, charges folks for what they actually use for the wear and tear of the roadway surfaces. And then too, along with that, we all hear people complaining, oh, these roads are terrible. I pay all this money at the gas pump and these roads are still terrible. When you hear people complaining about how little they're getting for the dollars that they pay, I would challenge you to ask them if they really understand how few dollars they really pay in relation to what they're expecting to get back. And the more we can do to help to spread the education and the understanding of what it really takes to build, to improve what we have today and to also build toward the future, I think that will funnel up to the political decision makers and the policy makers so that they will be more encouraged and feel that there is some level of public or general public support for making the tough decisions to do the right thing to take us into tomorrow.
So I would echo that significantly. It's incumbent upon all of us. We sit here and we share ideas back and forth, but I'll tell you what, the best place to sell this stuff is around the campfire this summer, the picnic table, or at the bar stool, where we have an opportunity to dispel myths, and that's what it is. There are so many myths out there about truck weights, about warranties. The contractors offer more warranties than all other states combined if you exclude Florida. 48 states combined don't offer as many warranties as we offer here in Michigan. Truck weights, 5% of the trucks on the road exceed the federal level, but those heavy trucks are what's doing all the damage in all the neighborhoods, in every community around town, even though there's not one truck that travels through those neighborhoods. We can tell these stories. We can talk about how little money is actually being collected in Michigan. We used to lead the nation. We put the first mile of concrete in. We've led the nation in a number of different ways, and we continue to do so through innovation, as the director said, working together, industry, the consultants, the department, the owner agencies. But in the end, the opportunities that our grandparents and our parents put in place for us have been redirected. Folks have focused on different priorities, and not that they're wrong. I'm not opposed to education. I'm not opposed to investing in other welfare and social programs at proper levels. But we've forgotten about infrastructure investment. Out of sight, out of mind. Another point on the underground infrastructure, as long as my toilet flushes, I'm good to go with the entire system's fine in my community. And that's just not the case. We literally have systems across the state that are nearly 100 years old underground. We've got to address these problems and dare to talk about them on the bar stool with the old crotchety guy next to you who dares to argue against you because he's a know-it-all. We've got to be the educated ones. We're all here, we know these issues, and we need to dare to step out and give them the facts. And I think that that's the most important thing looking forward. We can turn this ship around, but if we continue to just talk about it the way we have for so long now, we're just going to fall further and further behind. And as the director said, it's going to be more and more challenging to turn this big ship around. You have to have things that are constitutionally protected. That's why the folks that were our parents and grandparents in the 60s put that in place, that the money that will be collected for transportation will be spent on it. Those of us that were involved know that the 2015 package did three things wrong. A, it wasn't constitutionally protected. B, it phased it in too long and delayed fixing the problem. And C, it was money that we're going to have to fight for each and every year, and it wasn't enough. So now here we are, 4 short years later, fighting and talking about the same thing. At MITA, we feel like it's Groundhog Day. We're talking about it all over again. So we've got to be better at talking about this stuff. Thank you very much for having us.
Very good, very good. You know, what you clearly have is a leader with a vision. And what I'm reminded of as I conclude with these remarks is the story of a little boy who was walking along and he looked down and he saw a piece of bread. And he stopped because he saw what looked like some movement around the bread. And as he looked closer, Paul, he saw that it was an ant. And he looked at the ant as the ant was positioning itself around the bread. And Deborah, he said, the ant is going behind the bread. I think the ant is going to push the bread. And the ant pushed and pushed, but couldn't move the bread. And then he watched as the ant walked to the side of the bread. And here, Mike, he said, this ant is going to shove the bread. And the ant shoved and shoved, but couldn't move the bread. And then he watched as the ant walked away. And he thought about it for a moment, and he said, you know, the interesting thing about this is that it was not a crumb. It was actually a hearty piece of bread. And that notwithstanding, the ant made its best effort to push it, to shove it, to pull it, all of that. And as he was about to become a bit disheartened, because to think about that and to realize it is to know that sometimes we can have big dreams too. And if we really dare to have a big, bold dream, we have to acknowledge that we probably cannot, just do it ourselves, even with our best effort. And so as this little boy was about to walk off, he looked up and he saw that the ant was actually coming back. But this time the ant was not alone. There was a line of ants. And they all sort of circled the bread and they moved the bread. You've got the leadership. You've got the talent. You've got all of the muscle and insight and innovation and ingenuity and inspiration. It just takes everybody finding his or her place and moving the bread. So let's be about doing that. This is important to Michigan, but as Michigan has led the the nation, this is also an important time for Michigan to show the nation how it's done. Thank you.
For those of us old enough to remember Paul Harvey, he used to say, and now the rest of the story. So we want to talk a little bit, broaden the conversation a little bit about transportation, about infrastructure. Obviously, the transportation infrastructure is vitally important to Michigan, but it's a means to an end. What we're trying to do in this state are create vibrant, healthy communities that are competitive for jobs, for people, that are great places to live, that draw businesses in, that attract talented workers. And if you start from sort of the economic development realm of the world, or if you start from the public health realm of the world, you start with quality of life, you wind up at infrastructure. And I think that's really kind of how the four of us up here in this panel got here. We don't have any engineers here that I know about. Planners, we start talking, Mike starts talking about cement mixes and things, our eyes will roll in the back of our heads. But we're up here in our own ways talking about what makes for great communities. We have two corporations here that have played amazing roles in their communities, one in Detroit, one in the capital area, and both branching out to various other places around. We have an advocate for older Michiganders as they look to age, as our population gets older. How are people going to live? How are people going to live? And how are they going to work? How are they going to play in our communities as they age? From our perspective, we work with the Michigan Municipal League, works with local officials around the state trying to create those vibrant places that'll be competitive for jobs and for growth. We look around the country at the Seattles and the Bostons and the Austins and the Minneapolises and the Chicagos and say, okay, why are they beating us? Why are they beating us from an economic standpoint? Why are people attracted to those places and not staying here? How many of you know a young person who's graduated from college recently and moved to Chicago? You know, lots of folks. You know, and how many of those people have come home and said, Mom, Dad, Aunt, Uncle, whoever you are to them, I'm going to Chicago. The taxes are low and the regulatory environment's wonderful. Do you hear that from anybody? No. Because those aren't real metrics now. The real metrics in terms of the places that are doing well in quality of life. They're doing well in providing people with opportunities, with experiences that they want, whether they're aging, whether they're young people looking to start a career, whether they're families. And the people up at this table have gotten into this place really because it's something that they've seen in their communities, and they've seen in their businesses, and they've seen on behalf of their individuals. So with that, we're here to talk about placemaking. We're here to talk about how do we create those vibrant places and what role does great infrastructure play in that. And I guess by definition, how are we not able to compete in some of these fields with the current state of Michigan infrastructure, why it's so important to do something moving forward. So with that, I'm going to start with Margaret, who is from Delta Dental. And you say, why is Delta Dental involved in these conversations about creating great places and winding into the infrastructure conversation? Why is it so important for Delta Dental to be there? I asked her that question a few months back and was amazed by the answer. So I'll ask it again so everybody else can hear it.
Good morning. It's really quite a thrill to be here. I have been at Delta Dental for a little over 1 year. And when I started at the company, and it's a wildly successful company, and we handle business in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana from here in Okemos. And when I started, we did dental better. That was the end all, be all. And years ago, and I won't go detail by detail into the story, but I met a person who told me, whatever you do, think about how Jesus would do it. And it really influenced me in 3 careers leading up to this one. And what he meant was, make it about something bigger than yourself. And so over the last year, we've morphed Delta Dental's purpose. Now we build healthy, smart, vibrant communities. We just happen to make our money through dental benefits, mostly. But we invest in our communities. We have a very strong corporate citizenship program in all of our states, and we believe that economic development via placemaking is a very wise investment. It makes communities great for the people around us. It makes communities great for business, our customers can succeed in economically interesting and viable communities. Therefore, we succeed. So it really, for us, is about doing well and doing good and creating interesting, exciting places to live, work, and play and attract talent.
Very good. So, you know, people often ask me with the league, we've done a lot of work for the last decade on placemaking, written a couple books, and done all kinds of research and implementation. They say, what is placemaking? And if you go online, you'll find long, drawn-out academic answers and definitions to that. To me, it's very simple. It's about improving the human experience. You all know what that means. It's about improving the human experience where you're at. And it might be better to walk down the street and see beautiful architecture rather than shoddy buildings. It might be better it's certainly better to have energy on the streets and different ways, different housing opportunities, and different cultural opportunities and recreational things. It's about making the places great. I think one company that exemplifies that has been 200 companies, the Quicken Loans family of companies. What are we up to now?
150.
150, okay, I was close. 150 in the Quicken Loans company. They've done some great stuff in Detroit. And I think one of the things they've also done is try to create that human experience for the thousands of people that they have brought to work and to live within that footprint and that ever-growing footprint, looking at improving the human experience. So Jared Fleisch is going to tell us a little bit about what's happened with Quicken and why they're here today. Why is it so important to them?
I'll start, Dan, by thanking you and thanking Infrastructure Week for the opportunity to be here for two reasons. Number one, this is a subject that's very close to our heart, infrastructure and placemaking. And number two, because this is the only socially acceptable thing I've ever done in a brewery at 10:30 in the morning. So this is a milestone for me. Okay? I got to check this box, right? Dan Gilbert moved Quicken Loans to downtown Detroit in 2010. And it really was a visionary move, but one that was founded on a conviction about the importance of place in attracting talent. Gilbert is a visionary, so the rest of us were just, trying to figure out dial-up connections on, and get on AOL, chat with our friends. He was like, I'm going to shut down all of our brick and mortar mortgage businesses. I'm going to take our company entirely online. This is the future. Made a big bet, and now Quicken Loans is the largest mortgage lender in the United States. Started off essentially, small business, and now beats out, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. It's a great story. And he moved the company to downtown Detroit in 2010, which, by the way, was a tough time in Detroit. The city was in bankruptcy not 2 years later. But the story is, for the 100th time, somebody walked into his office, and it was in a suburban office park, and said, I'm leaving to go to Chicago. And Dan said, well, why? He said, I'm just tired of looking out the window and seeing nothing but the expansive parking lots. And we want more. We want quality of life. We want quality of place. They didn't use those terms. That was the idea. I want to go watch a restaurant, walk to a bar, get lunch somewhere, go out, happy hour after work. So we reached a critical mass where in 2010, Dan moved 3,500 employees to downtown Detroit. We now have 17,000 team members. Granted, a big part of it was, kind of what Dan calls a perfect sunny day, the opposite of a perfect storm of, interest rates going to zero and being great for the refinance market. Heck, maybe if you're buying a new home, you want a mortgage banker in there with you, but let me refi the most convenient way possible online. So the company started to boom. But ultimately, Quicken Loans is successful because of human capital. And because of the intellectual capital that drives the best-in-class technology. And the thesis was absolutely borne out to attract that human capital here in Detroit. We need to deliver quality of place. And that means being in a vibrant environment, which Detroit inherently had, and investing in it to really enhance the quality of place. So I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to come back and talk about it more, but we've done a tremendous amount to invest in campus marshes, which is one of the great, urban public spaces in the country. In the Woodward corridor, in terms of the Q line and other placemaking improvements. The riverfront, Capitol Park, Spirit Plaza, and the list goes on. I won't detail them, but the last thing I'll say is GW University in DC did a study of 500 corporate relocations, before and after. And they found that unifying factor was a big jump in walk score and in transit score. Companies want to be there because that's where talent wants to be. The talent wants quality of place. It was our thesis. It was borne out, and now we're trying to continually enhance that experience. I'll get into that detail as we go.
Sure. I think it's important. There's two wildly successful corporations here, both of them talking about investment. And I think when it comes to our infrastructure here in Michigan, we've chosen austerity over investment. And austerity is not an economic development strategy. It's certainly not a community development strategy. And one of the things we need to invest in is our people. And certainly from a people perspective, we talk about an aging demographic. We're all getting older. That's the good news, because the opposite of that means something bad happened. We're not getting older. But we are aging as a state. People are living longer, and they want to retire differently. They want to age differently. They want to do it in place. They want to do it I could say the retiring boomers and their millennial children want the same types of communities in terms of walkability, in terms of being able to do different things, different cultural opportunities. Their Saturday nights probably look a lot different, but in terms of what they're looking for and they want to locate, it's very much the same. And AARP Michigan has been a fabulous partner in getting this conversation going around placemaking as well, and why it's so important to older Michiganders. Paul Cunningham can tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, and also thank you to Dan and to the Infrastructure Week for this opportunity, elevating the conversation. And even Margaret asked me, so I get why Quicken Loans is here, and I understand Delta, but what's AARP has to do with this? Well, if you're looking for membership,
You know who you are.
they said you know who you are.
Look under your chair.
But that's absolutely not true. We don't even sell memberships at the state level. However, Michigan is in a unique position. We are only state, for the first time in our history in this state, we're in 6 years. We'll all be here in 6 years. 6 years from now, the number of people who are 65 and older will outnumber those who are 18 and younger. And I often ask the question, are we ready? And what does that mean? What does it mean in terms of what older adults want? Well, first of all, they want to age in place. They want to stay in their communities. Why do we want them to stay in their communities? They are an economic driver. Even when the economy is bad, older adults still go to the movies, they still have health care, they still have transportation, they buy cars, they still like the arts and the cultures, staying in the community. We don't want them going to Chicago to live with their daughters or their grandchildren, whomever. And the grandchildren and daughters don't necessarily want them coming there either. So we want them to age in place and stay in place. So when we poll, we've got 1.4 million members just in Michigan, like 38 million members nationwide. So when we poll, we ask older adults, what's your number one concern? And believe it or not, other than health care and some other things, transportation. Transportation is the number one concern. What's the one conversation we never want to have with our family member or a family member to have with us? And that's taking the keys away. Not being able to drive anymore, losing some of your dignity, your independence. So AARP is all over autonomous vehicles. We're all over rideshare. We're all over age-friendly communities where you can walk, and go to a museum, where you can walk and go to the grocery store. We're looking at all of those things. Anything that impacts the life of people who are 50 and older, we're connected to it. And this is a statistic that still blows my mind, because I've repeated it about 50 times now. The fastest growing segment of our population as it relates to age are people who are 80 years and older. That's good news, but are we ready? Are we ready as it relates to healthcare and caregiving? Right now, and some of you may even have it on your phone, there are apps on your phone that you can download and you can talk to your doctor within 15 minutes, FaceTime right on your phone. You don't even have to go to Ready Care or anything anymore. A lot of the medical care facilities have that application available free of charge. So you don't have to call someone to take you to and from the doctor. But if you don't have internet, if you don't have broadband, you don't have access to that. In the rural parts of up north in Michigan, folks go to Wisconsin because it's the closest medical facility. So infrastructure is not just roads and transportation, but it's anything that improves the quality of life for us, all of us, as we age. And the same street sign, you have 35 seconds, and you say, oh, you have 35 seconds across the street or 45 seconds across the street. If you're a person with a cane, that may not be enough. But if you're a person, a young mother with 2 children, it still may not be enough. So we look at anything that impacts the quality of life for older adults, their communities, and their families, and that's why.
And it's amazing, you think, Quicken trying to track young workers in an urban environment and AARP looking at older Americans, but when you dig a little bit deeper and get past the front page, it looks different, the pictures. It's all the same stuff, and it's all about building these great places, building spots that are competitive economically, and it doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen without investment. So I'll kick it off here with the question period with the one infrastructure question when it comes to Michigan, or your little spots within Michigan, your footprints, that you guys talk about most in terms of a need that's not being met right now.
One geography or just one set of issues?
One set of issues. Is it clean water? Is it transportation? Is it trains? Is it planes? Is it automobiles? Is it any of that stuff?
Is quality of life considered one issue? It's all of the above, you know, really, in so many ways it is all of the above. It's being able to age the way that you want to age, and to age in place, and to have choices, and to maintain your dignity while you age. And that's for any age. It's being able to still continue with the quality of life that you've been used to. I mean, age is just a number anymore. You know, when I was growing up, 65 years old, it was like, you know, they had a certain odor, they had a certain, you know, haircut and style. It was like they were old. You know, you didn't want to be around older folks. That's so different anymore. And, you know, AARP has a program called Experience for Hire. 100,000 unfilled jobs in the state of Michigan. You know about this, Dan. 100,000 jobs. What if we were able to fill 10% of them? Employers in the room, you can't find the talent that you need. A lot of folks left the workplace early, got early buyouts, so our Experience for Hire program is connecting older adults with some of the work that's out there until employers can find the kind of talent that they need. So there's so many opportunities. I don't know if I can identify just one issue. It's just continued quality of life and choices.
Yeah, I look at it the same way. When you ask, what is the most urgent need in Michigan? I say, you know, we're spoiled for choice. We need investments in our roads. We need to fix our roads. There's no question about it. I was with a group of my friends, you know, took a little vacation down in North Carolina, and you think they talk about women or this or that. Look at these roads. These roads are so beautiful. I mean, only in Michigan, you travel from Michigan, and that's what, you know, they're oogling, the roads. I swear, this is a true story, okay? We need investments in mass transportation too. Public transit. You know, in Southeast Michigan, you know, we do spend less on public transit than any peer region. We spend a little shy of $70. The average region spends $184 if you look at the top metropolitan areas. That's a critical issue for quality of life. Folks who don't have access to an automobile, for seniors and disabled, and for choice riders who want that quality of life, which we're seeing more and more, you know, in the millennial cohort. We need to invest in our quality of places, the infrastructure that that makes a place attractive and special. People want to visit, you know, located business here, and I think, you know, one of the bad patterns we get into is you know, we need this instead of that, or this more than that. You know, I think if you look at the most successful communities, you go to Denver, for example, and you see a place that has a very good modern road network, world-class transit, phenomenal places like the 16th Street Pedestrian Mall and other public spaces. You know, we need to recognize that comprehensively infrastructure is the foundation of our success. It happens to also create a lot of jobs as you build it, and realize we need it all, and we're better off for it all.
Dan, I think that part of what we're looking at is not just bricks and mortar. I think an essential component of placemaking is safety and the feeling of safety in places that we build and draw people to. I think at the same time, inclusive spaces that are built so that everyone is welcome. I look at the Detroit riverfront, and it's been beautifully designed. We're hoping that we can do as well here in our Lansing development on the river to welcome everyone from all various income levels, all shapes, sizes, colors, stripes, and make it a gathering place for all. But safety has to be ground zero in all of this. And I think we do sadly kid ourselves if we think that our communities are as safe as they need to be for all.
right? Which really brings us to the larger issue of how we finance our governments, and I won't take too much time on that, but when we talk about infrastructure here, we're talking about a lot of bricks and mortars. When we talk about policemen and fire professionals and public safety people, and I mean, those numbers have been dwindling like crazy, along with the money for our roads and our bridges and our water and whatnot. So it's austerity sort of across the board on this kind of stuff, and in many ways, a lot of this stuff is being held together with toothpicks and rubber bands and glue and everything else. We've got to do a better job with that as we move forward. I just want to take 1 second too to talk about the types of communities that we've been building here in Michigan, the ones we need to compete. For a long time, we've been building automobile-dependent places. We've been building the types of communities that Paula was referencing. I like to think sometimes the same individual who cites Walmarts is citing senior facilities. It's always sort of on the edge of town somewhere where you have to drive to it. And I don't think it makes sense for either one of them, but I think we need to do a better job with those types of things. In 1980, we were a top third per capita income state in the country. We have between 9.5 million and 10 million people in Michigan. Today we have between 9.5 and 10 million people in Michigan, and we're a bottom third per capita income state in the country. Yet we have considerably more infrastructure than we had then. We've been sort of building out. In many ways, we've been disinvesting with the places that now are more competitive, that now are drawing people to them. So when we talk about not being able to afford our infrastructure, it's simple math. We're relatively worse off as a people, and we have a lot more infrastructure to take care of. So as we look to invest moving forward, I hope that the state and its localities and business groups and interest groups and everybody gets together and talks about not just the amount of money that we might raise through a gas tax or all the various aspects that we've been talking about today, but that we look at pushing that money into places that improve people's quality of life, that are long-term sustainable, and that make us more economically competitive. And I think those are the types of things that we need. So it might not just be more money for a road, it might be money to take a road from 8 lanes down to 3 lanes that's walkable, and throw some transportation, some different type of transportation in a neighborhood setting or in a downtown setting. We need to move people differently around the state than we moved in the past. I like to say that, you know, for 100 years or so, probably longer than that, our transportation network in this country was built to take you to places. In the last 30, 40, 50 years, we've been building it to take you through places. And that's a difference. That's one change in a word, but it's a different type of transportation system. And it's not one that people are looking for now. They're looking for things a little bit different. Again, they're looking for that experience where they want to be, where people are more mobile than they've ever been, businesses are more mobile than they've ever been, entire industries are more mobile than they have ever been. And the kicker, the way that we're going to attract people to Grand Rapids or Lansing or Detroit or anywhere else in the state is by that quality of life, by that human experience they can do a better job with. So I guess from the perspective, tell us one of the things that you guys learned collectively, either being deeply involved in it, as I know Jared was, or from the outside as Margaret and Paul were, about the Amazon experience, which in many ways was deeply flawed. But when Amazon said, okay, here's the things we're looking for, how did that change your thoughts in terms of what your workers might be looking for, what your business models might be moving forward?
There was a whole debate at the time about whether or not Amazon really made transit a decisive issue in their location search. I mean, you can zoom out and take the view that they had this whole, got everybody all riled up and ended up going to New York and Washington, D.C. So was the whole thing kind of a false flag exercise? Maybe, but to the extent that they had, real criteria for it, I will tell you, because I was on the phone call with their, chief site select person who said to us, yes, we had 2 issues when it came to Detroit's bid. And by the way, Detroit's bid with Windsor was, probably the most hotly debated in that round. Some real champions for it, and some other folks who just said, maybe too early in the comeback of the city to make this kind of bet. And that was for 2 reasons. Number one, they said specifically, you just don't have a transit. We're worried about getting 50,000 people to a place of employment, okay? And we're worried about attracting talent. We know from our own survey of our own employees in Seattle and elsewhere They want it. They want it. And they also said, you know, extrapolating from that, really it's about talent. That was the play. And we know from a million different studies that talent is attracted to place. There's this whole debate about what do you do first? Do you, do you need jobs that attract talent? Do you need place that attracts talent? When jobs come. It's not one of these things like, yes, we need to do both. We need to
All the above, right?
all of the above. We need the most strategic approach to attract businesses, because without jobs, people aren't going to come. But there's no question too that, you know, when there are competing economic opportunities, talented, educated, mobile young people in particular want quality of place. They want vibrancy. They want mobility options. They want density. And Amazon, you know, made that very clear. Our point of view to continue the pitch for Detroit, you know, my boss believes 100% if Amazon came to Detroit, it would have been enormously successful. More successful than Long Island City, obviously, right? You know? You know, in terms of the talent play, you know, our view is if this company came to Detroit and said, you know, we need 50,000 people, that we would be a magnet for the, you know, the whole country, certainly the, you know, the whole Great Lakes region to draw talent here. And why is that? Because we still have a very competitive cost of living. We saw a lot of insurance and some other things. And number one, but number two, we have quality of place. We really do. We'll continue working to enhance it. But we've got a cool city with great cachet and a beautiful Great Lakes state. You know, with character, with wonderful architecture, with great public space, with great cultural assets. So we really did believe and continue to believe that if jobs came here, that, you know, people would clamor to come to that opportunity.
But we missed on infrastructure.
But we missed on
infrastructure. And Amazon obviously is at this enormous level, the type of thing we really haven't seen in terms of somebody going out there and advertising 50,000 jobs. But I can tell you from a site selection standpoint, that's happening in companies that have 5 and 10 and 20 employees all the time. They're looking for those same types of infrastructure investments in communities, and they're expecting it. And you know, you can fly into Metro Airport outside Detroit, a wonderful international airport, and you can't get a bus anywhere or a train anywhere. It's hard to get a cab. And there are people just say, no, I'm not coming. And you talk to those young people again that went to Chicago, you know, $500, $600, $700 a month for a car, and insurance and parking is money they could spend on something much more important to them, like technology or booze. And it's just that simple in terms of how people are making up their minds on some things. So it isn't all the above thing. It's the roads, it's transportation, it's clean water. I'd like to be at a place where we have the resources to make those decisions rather than just being faced with 2 bad decisions like we're doing right now. Do I fill a half a dozen potholes, or do I work on the water pipes? I don't have enough money to do both. I probably don't have enough money to just go out there and patch some things. I'd like to get to the other spot and give ourselves a chance there. Any other selection issues or things that Amazon or other types of programs brought up to you guys?
Well, I was actually squarely in the middle of the dialogue anyway. I was running Junior Achievement for Southeastern Michigan when the bid went out. And Stephen McGee's film was just extraordinary. If you didn't see the film, you'd come here just by looking at the pitch video. But I was in the talent business and had been running schools prior to that. And there is an infrastructure element to the education system, and not just when it comes to teaching kids, but the buildings that we're teaching people in our urban communities are dilapidated in many respects. And you probably paid attention to the water problem in Detroit public schools, not unlike Flint. Our kids were drinking lead and copper-tainted water, and we had to go and put a pitch out to the philanthropic community to fix that problem because there weren't dollars elsewhere to do it. And so I believe infrastructure is a vast set of issues beyond roads and sewers and basic transportation.
I can remember reading the article about why Amazon did not come to Detroit, and I still have the article in my file in the office because we've used it to learn from, we've used it to grow from. We have an initiative going on right now to make all of Michigan an age-friendly state. It's something that 4 other states have done, and it's an aspirational goal. There are some principles or tenets connected to that, But I use that article because Detroit is just, if you haven't been to Detroit, you really need to go and spend some time there. It is what we're trying to do for the entire state of Michigan. And it is a phenomenal place, and it just shows us that it can happen. It can happen. And one of the things that the article said was that they did not come, Amazon did not come to Detroit because it wasn't as age-friendly in terms of transportation, in terms of talent and all of that. So I use that not as, you know, oh, poor us, but oh, as lessons learned. How do we grow from this? What else do we do? And I just want to add one other quick point, which is totally off what we're talking about. But we always talk about money and resources, and that's important. We all know it's important. But for crying out loud, if we could reduce diabetes 1% in people 65 years and older, it would save $32 billion. That's an independent study done by public sector consultants. 1%. So let's talk about what we can do to prevent some of these things from happening. And then you can have money. Let's reduce it by 10%. Let's fill 10% of the jobs that are unfilled in the state of Michigan right now, the 100,000 jobs. There's money. It's just people are so territorial anymore. They don't want to let go of anything. I know you didn't ask me that, but go on.
I had a list of diabetes questions too. But I did notice there was only 2 Danishes in the back. I thought it was more fitting with the austerity of infrastructure.
My point is that there's so much that we can do, and we always look for adding on layers, you know, and there's not going to be a pot of money coming anytime soon. So what do we need to think, how do we need to think differently and strategically? And Martin Luther King had a quote talking about the tranquility, the drug of tranquility leads to gradualism. We think, you know, we're tranquil because we keep gradually increasing. There's a sense of urgency here. 6 years from now, remember, 65-year-olds will outnumber 18-year-olds. And we're not ready for either 18 or 65.
Yeah, I do think that in this phase especially, that we've sort of gotten used to this spot of being 49th and 50th on a lot of lists. And I think sometimes, especially from a legislative perspective, when the legislature comes out and this bill maybe infrastructure related, maybe something else, it usually has to do with economics. They compare ourselves to Indiana, and we're obsessed with Indiana. Well, they're 49th on every list that we're 50th on. So why are we after somebody else? You know, why are we after Minnesota or Connecticut or somebody out there who's got much higher per capita income or is attracting folks? And I think sometimes we've talked ourselves into this spot where, you know, sorry, my tangent, but for my money, Henry Ford, although in many ways an interesting human being, but from an entrepreneur perspective, was the quintessential American entrepreneur of the 20th century, maybe ever. And he started this thing where the entire world came here, the entire country came here at that point in time, to build jobs, to build cars and move things forward. In some ways, that credible innovation spawned an uninnovative generation or two later, where we were sort of not able to move around and do some different things. And I think that's permeated our systems, it's permeated our governments, it's permeated our universities, our businesses even, and to the point where we really don't dream much anymore as a state. And when you talk about our last big infrastructure investment in this state was the Mackinac Bridge. You know, and you go other places and you see these huge changes taking place, and recreating things and drawing in water systems and doing all kinds of things to change sort of their flight, and we've stopped doing that, and I think we've just sort of gotten used to it. We've kind of put ourselves in this sort of state hospice situation where we're just going to sort of ride it out. And we need to start dreaming again. And we need to start investing and betting on ourselves. We bet on ourselves, we're really good. And we've proven that in the past, and we can do great things moving forward. What's the business role in this? You guys are here. What's the business role in pushing for better infrastructure?
We're a not-for-profit, so we don't typically like to get engaged in spending your tax
What's the
dollars.
not-for-profit role in this?
We look at it, again, as a not-for-profit. We really don't engage heavily in legislative debates about how we spend tax dollars on infrastructure. But we do know that we need communities that work. We need sewers that work and roads that are drivable and all of those things. So on that front, of course, we're with you. We're just not lobbying in that arena. But from a corporate citizenship perspective, we are making our single largest corporate investments in our 60-year history in placemaking and building communities that are going to sustain us for our next 10, 20 years. And we don't think it can go beyond 10, 20 years because we think the way in which people live is going to be ever changing. But the investments we're making in creating great places to live, work, and play, and build culture are pillars of our business strategy. So it's not just building pretty parks. It's very intentional around gathering talent, retaining talent, growing talent. And, you know, don't you just want to be in interesting communities? We're going to be in mid-Michigan. We are headquartered on Okemos Road, and we've just begun a renovation project. We're not building a pretty headquarters to live in a dull town. And so we are really strongly going forward on this strategy in all 3 of our states. And we have an investment coming in Detroit in the placemaking arena that's truly going to be noteworthy.
Sure. So my boss actually calls our family companies more than profit family companies. In our case, we have to be profitable to be afloat and to be able to do good things, but we're much more than that in terms of civic commitments and engagement and public policy issues and just a sense of mission and being part of something bigger. It's from Dan's heart, absolutely. I mean, he grew up in the city of Detroit, watched its decline and wanted nothing more than to be part of its comeback. But he also believes that, gets back to the question of attracting talent. We want to attract talent. Folks want to be part of something. They want to be part of making a difference. And so this whole, by working with our family companies and working on something for the city, for the state, for your community is a big deal. What's the business role in infrastructure investment? It's being able to look folks in the eye and say, we're a business. We are fiscally responsible, fiscally conservative, so we have to be successful. But we know we cannot be successful without investing, making necessary investments in things that are foundational to our success. So to have, in some ways, a conservative business person come out and say, we need to do the fiscally responsible thing and invest in our infrastructure because we can't grow and succeed and sustain without it, we think it is an important role to play.
So I think really the lesson that we wanted to bring today, if we might be so bold, is to talk about the fact that infrastructure, a road, for example, just doesn't stop at the curb. It goes well beyond that. So we talk about clean water, we talk about moving people around in transportation systems, or building new roads, or filling potholes, or anything in between. Ultimately, we're trying to create these great places. We're trying to create communities that people truly care about. And that's what draws people and will draw people. That's what drew people to Michigan to begin with. That's going to draw people to Michigan in the future. And when we begin to bet on ourselves again and look forward, we'll be successful. So with that, we want to say thank you very much. I want to thank the panel and enjoy the rest of the morning.
When we look back at some of the panels we've just gone through, we've talked a lot about options and what that means for making places that will retain talent, places where people will be able to age in place and really keep their children around and really make the communities they want to have. And a lot of that really ties back to what the core idea of mobility is. And I think there's this issue in the United States where when we talk about mobility, it very quickly devolves into autonomous vehicles or some Jetsons flying car type situation. But really, mobility is a lot bigger than about how we make the decisions and how we get to the places we want and how we have those choices. And I think we've got a great group of panelists here who can discuss that and really help contextualize it and ground it in real-world projects and talk about it from not just the automobile perspective, but from a broader perspective. So I'd like to start with just a question to each of you to just go out. So when you think about mobility and you think about what it means for our communities, how do your organizations approach it or define mobility, and what does that mean for the way that you work? So starting with you, Sean, running the biggest public-private partnership that I'm aware of that works on mobility in any given state. So how do you frame mobility when you talk to stakeholders, or say you're talking to my mom who just doesn't really care about this, but wants to make sure she can get to the grocery store?
Ron's probably very techy though. Yeah. So I'm with Planet M, which is with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And what we do is we focus on a lot of the public-private partnerships, but essentially what we want to be able to do is to provide the services and the ability for innovation to happen at an accelerated rate. We break it down into 3 simple things. One is around business development for technology activation. So we provide grant funding to companies to connect with, whether it's large corporates or startups. We want to provide them with funding to test as well as deploy their technology. And then we do a lot of one-on-one business development matchmakings and then asset coordination as well. So to answer the question, we think about mobility as autonomous, connected, ride-sharing, electrification. So in doing a lot of our programming, it's not just about autonomous vehicles, right? So you also have, the vertical takeoff, you have what's happening in the airspace, and we want to make sure that mobility is safer as well as accessibility is increased for all. And when we look for projects, we're looking for people that can solve those solutions because, whether it's first mile, last mile, or connect solutions or new innovation of people just piloting new technology, we want the public to be able to experience that. And that's what we do and focus around for Planet M and our mobility direction.
And Marcus, it's flipping to you, mobility is also about having the right data solutions and integrations to make this work. Can you talk a little bit about how Bytemark and Siemens approach mobility?
Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe also coming back to your, let's say, first question just a second, because I think it happens quite often that, we're getting asked about the future of mobility, and I think sharing the road safely takes on a new meaning as the future of mobility gets closer every day. It won't no longer be just the cars making room for bicycles, but privately owned cars more and more share the roads with shared mobility services, and humanly driven cars will more and more yield to self-driving vehicles as our cities getting smarter. So I think like everything else in the world, it's all about connectivity, it's more personalized, and it's more on-demand, demand responsive. And I think as a company, we have been driving towards the future of mobility through our 160 year of history. We've presented the first electric traffic light systems more than 100 years back. And we have the pleasure to be very deeply rooted and embedded in the ITS infrastructure here in Michigan, with more than 90% of all signalized intersections from Siemens. However, if we want to drive into the future of mobility, I think it's all about making the signal smarter, integrating various modes of transportation in order to ultimately achieve our goal and get, let's say, throughput in transportation, get people off the road potentially to a sharing economy of public transit systems. And this is, if we are not smart enough in Siemens to develop something by ourselves, that we buy companies. This is what we have done with Bytemark. So our vision is that we are certainly very strong in digitalizing our infrastructure, increasing throughput on existing traffic lights like we do here in Michigan in Ann Arbor or Traverse City, where we are making dump signals smart and can increase the throughput by more than 20%. By the end of the day, from a broader picture, we want to integrate various modes of transport into one solution, and this is where multimodal obviously comes into play, where we are enabling trip planning, mobile ticketing into one solution, including whether this is a bike share, car sharing, type of option, and Austin is a great example for that. With Capital Metro in Austin, we have always done mobile ticketing. As a second step, we have integrated trip planning into the mobile transit app that citizens and commuters in Austin are able to plan a trip from not only from A to B, but A to C, using all the transit options, biking and walking, and now we're expanding that into ride sharing, for instance, with the local ride-hailing companies, which will, let's say, expand the access of the public transit system significantly.
So, Eric, I think this is also a really nice transition to what HNTV does as a large engineering, construction, architecture firm. So we kind of can get caught up in the technology of the vehicle itself and how smart the processors are and all that goes into that, and the cameras and the network. But what does this mean for the actual built environment? What do we mean when we we talk about mobility for cities, when it does come down to the concrete, the asphalt, the markings, the design of the place, how does a company like HNTB, who builds those environments and helps design those environments, think about mobility?
Sure, I think we define mobility very similar to how others define it, right? It's moving goods and services and people from point A to point B. So as a firm focused on the built environment, we're really focusing on how do we enable a more efficient, safer movement of those people and goods. Whether it's using technology, whether it's hard infrastructure, but it's utilizing the assets that we have and anticipating where technology may go to make the assets forward flexible. We're out there building a built environment that hopefully lasts 30, 40, 50 years. And if you think about the smartphones that everybody has in their pocket, right, those weren't there 12 years ago. So how do you anticipate these rapid changes in technology with an asset that is supposed to last 30, 40, 50 years? And that's really what we're focusing on, is facilitating that efficient and safe movement of goods and services, whether it's freight, people, or things like that. So there's a number of examples that we anticipate will exist in the future with connected and autonomous vehicles. But there's a lot of really great things going on in the country right now in terms of best practices that are available with today's technology. Very proud to be involved with the US 23 flex lanes north of Ann Arbor. I think it's a great use of existing pavement and real estate. Instead of, there was a big congestion issue north of Ann Arbor that was posing huge safety issues, right? And the traditional thinking would have been just to add a lane, widen the freeway, expand the facility. Instead, through the Department of Transportation's leadership here, we were able to allow vehicles to run on the shoulders through dynamic shoulder use during peak periods and provide that additional throughput, really improve the safety on the corridor at a fraction of the cost of what a traditional project would have been. So that is just one way where we're using technology through active traffic management to facilitate more efficient and safer movement of people.
I think this fits in very well with kind of the broader conversation that we've had, which is just that Michigan, like many places, is resource constrained, right? There's hard stops on budgeting, whether you're a state, local government, certainly the federal government's in the throes of conversations about where we could potentially raise the at this point, kind of mythic $2 trillion. So this is a lot about, not only is mobility a set of technologies, but those are technologies that can really bring more value out of existing assets we had. So I was going to throw over to Marcus. You guys do a lot of smart signaling work at Siemens, which I think is just a fascinating way we can take existing assets and just make them better through technology. Are there specific examples of places that you've seen success stories or a way to ground mobility in a way that people might not think of it? It's not just an autonomous vehicle or a scooter, which are great, but if we're talking about like signaling and using those technologies, what are some cool places where we can look at that kind of signalization work?
Yeah, I mean, I think first the good news is when we talk about the future of transportation, a lot of this is software-driven, algorithm-driven. So it is not always about increasing the infrastructure significantly, investing a significant amount of money in order to improve the situation. So I think that's definitely the good news, that we are able with the latest technologies to build on existing infrastructure, make them smarter, and use digital solutions in order to have high impacts. And so I would say digitalization is not everything, but in the future it's almost everything. And there are a number of great examples across the country. When it comes to connected vehicle technology, one of the prime examples in my perspective is, for instance, in Tampa, Florida, or also New York City. With both of them, I have been the US DOT pilot projects for connected vehicle technology. And first, it is a project where we have provided the infrastructure for this technology, and in a total interoperable way. So all the existing, partially 10-year-old traffic infrastructure could be fully maintained and kept in place while we are adding connected vehicle technology. And it is not only a piece of hardware, a roadside unit which you put on and add to the infrastructure. At the end of the day, it's applications such as red light violation warning, curb speed warning, harmonized speed recommendation, wrong way driving. There is an endless number of applications, all software driven, which can run in a coordinated way utilizing this technology. And I think the power of connected vehicle technology is, let's say, certainly large compared with other new innovations, just because we can handle existing use cases which we are very well aware, like travel time or public transit prioritization. But we can all the enhanced safety features, like giving a warning to a driver if a pedestrian is stepping to the intended path, and prevent accidents from happening.
So, Sean, at Planet M, it's really cool because you get this perspective of not just one company or one vertical, but you get to work with a whole host of different entrepreneurs and large, OEMs and different groups. What are some of the things you're really excited that are coming out of Planet M that you think is going to be kind of the next incubation for the next wave of mobility? Obviously, Michigan was the genesis of the first big wave of mobility in the United States. What are you seeing that's going to shape the future coming out of Michigan, coming out of your work at Planet M?
Yeah, so the way we have it structured is we look to support a lot of startups, but corporates in general, but with the startup ecosystem, the first thing we do is we have space in downtown Detroit where if you're a mobility company, that's where you exist. Where we have corporates and startups coming together, serendipitous occurrences happen as they just bypass each other. And then what that does is, obviously as the corporate side, you're looking for that innovation, you're looking for maybe that's the startup mindset where you have a fail-fast mentality. And on the startup side, you're looking to commercialize your product. So it's a very good mixture for them to be able to coexist. And through that, the grant program that they apply to is just it's a matter of this is what we can. This is a pilot that we want to be able to put in the real world. We want people to be able to see it, feel it, experience it. We just announced it yesterday where the new recipients, one is a pilot around robots that are going to be at Beaumont Hospital. I think one of their pain points was that they have their workers going up and down the elevators, and that takes a lot of their time, so that this robot is able to transport different things throughout the hospital just by putting it inside. It has a cooler and a heater, so that's a pilot project that's actually happening. We have another pilot project with, there's a lot of accidents with first responders, and this company in particular, based out of Chicago, they focused on creating an alert system so that you're able to reduce the number of accidents, reduce the number of costs to when you break the infrastructure from an accident. And then one of our first pilots ever was around, it was in downtown Detroit with a company called Dirk. And this company was focused around being able to use artificial intelligence to predict accidents before they occur. And then what that does, obviously, is you're able to put different onboard units on the car to alert the driver that you're going too fast, you're about to hit a car in front of you. But then also, when you look at that, it also collects data for traffic management. I know we've all driven our cars over the rubber strips, but imagine now if you can just have the data to automatically be calculated. So through the cameras, they're doing traffic counts, right? So there's different innovative ways where, as you think about the innovation that will go into an autonomous car or a connected car, there's different use cases that you're also able to use that. And a lot of times people sometimes forget the fact that today we're using a lot of the technology that these autonomous vehicles do have, right? So when it comes to adaptive cruise control, when it comes to when your car goes over the line that your steering wheel shakes or it makes a beep, all those are different tools that we're using today. But then we also, with Planet M, we're looking to look for that company around the world that's going to be able to advance the future of mobility in these type of ways.
So we've touched on this a little bit, and I think this group of panelists can reflect well on this, but what do innovators need from the state and local governments? And on the flip side, what do innovators not understand about state and local governments as they move these projects forward? Because unlike Google or a lot of other technology companies, this lives in the real world. This mobility impacts people's health and safety, their security. There's certainly comfort levels of whether you want these on your streets. what needs to happen to roll these technologies out in an effective way from the state and local level, and then we'll pivot to the federal level afterwards. But what is working at the state and local level to make sure that these technologies are rolled out in a way that makes sense, that keeps people safe, but also is continuing to kind of push the envelope so we do get the technology and mobility future that we all kind of want?
Yeah, so but on the state side and local level, partnerships, right? So it's easier said than done, but I think the more that you partner, the better that you're able to install a particular technology in a municipality, for example. So, we've had companies come to us, and their biggest thing is that they want that connection to a municipality on a municipality level, so that they can obviously do an installation, or to partner with them to be able to tap into the devices. So like for Siemens, there's traffic controls. Like, you just can't let anybody tap into that system, right? It'll be mayhem. So you need that ability to connect to the right partners to be able to innovate as fast as possible.
Yeah, I would maybe add, I mean, sometimes, especially for newer technologies, innovation, certainly sometimes it needs a little seed corn from the government to get things rolling. And but whenever we're talking about high impact, powerful technologies who at the end of the day solve a real world problem, usually goes downhill, and there is a path towards rollout even in times of budget constraints. And I think what we are doing, for instance, in terms to foster innovation and also a new way of engaging with our customers, who are obviously very traditionally municipalities, cities, and state agencies, is we created just last year a digital lab. A digital lab, these are 14 people, data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, software developers, no product, nothing to develop. They, so the idea is that they co-create, that they engage with clients from the industry, from the government sector, and solve a real world problem. My only expectation is that we can scale it and that we can replicate it. And again, I think this is a way, let's say, where also companies need maybe to rethink their own development process, because we are very used to having clear business cases for products. I mean, we started investing in connected vehicle technologies more than 10 years back. Actually, more than 10 years, we had one of the first pilots in Ann Arbor. And now the technology is ready for prime time. But today the industry is moving so fast that we cannot only apply this methodology, we also need to do it differently. I think you need a receiving end, you need a partner in order to do that. Because sometimes it will fail. If you are really disruptive, really disruptive, then I think 90% of what you do should fail. And as a company, you should have that freedom to try out those things and fail. And at the same time, obviously working with the government, failing, if you engage in such a true innovation, should also be an option, right? And I know this is not an option if we're talking about traffic light control, traffic management, even connected vehicle, which is a standard off-the-shelf product already today. But if we really think beyond and the boundaries, apply AI technologies in completely new ways, then I think failing need to be an option. And this, I think, is something which is not necessarily embedded in our thinking, especially in the business to governance type of relationship, and probably from both sides.
So Eric, HNTV sits at kind of the nexus of the technology, the integration, the engineering, and kind of deep roots working with municipalities to actually execute on these projects. So how do you bridge the gap when you're working with municipalities to help them integrate some of these technologies or exciting new things or adapt to the future, when there's also problems when there's just potholes? So how do you work with cities to make sure they're kind of mobility ready for the next step, whatever that might be?
I think Sean hit it best. It's partnerships and communication, right? The speed of innovation is a lot faster than the speed of infrastructure decay or renewal or the speed of government. So how do you allow for this environment to where technology can continue to evolve and we can harness the benefits of technology and still stay forward flexible to the future. And so really that boils down to good, strong, long-lasting partnerships with industry and technology to where industry can bring forward new innovations and technology to the public sector. I know you said you weren't talking about the federal government yet, but the challenge with sole sourcing equipment or U.S. patents is something that holds us back as an industry of not being able to really have a methodology to deal with that. But being able to communicate on a regular basis, whether it's through industry partnerships or panels or councils or whatever that looks like, to be able to understand where the industry is and where its trajectory is going. You may not know exactly where it's going, but which direction it's going. And then really reflect on that. How does that impact, or could that impact the built-in environment? And are there ways that we can renew the built environment that doesn't predispose technology to one answer or another, but allows for the possibility of both, so the free market can decide which way to go.
So again, I like this jumping out point to talk a little bit about the federal role. You know, again, we keep hearing these 1.8, $2 trillion, whatever big numbers. Those are great in the abstract, but when that functionally comes down to a state or local level, whether it's through DOT, through Tiger grants, or Build Act, whatever it might be, where the rubber meets the road for the cash, what would you want to see in terms of the mobility technologies and mobility platforms you're pursuing if there were to be a federal bill? So outside of kind of it would be nice if we all had more money. Are there specific things you would need federal support to get done, to get across the finish line, whether that's standard setting, whether that's money for R&D? What would be helpful for your respective industries and positions from the federal government?
I could start. I think in many aspects it's also good if there's not too much involvement and it can, let's say, just be done both from, let's say, the local level and also from the and from a, let's say, normal industry development angle. I think there are certainly in every industry aspects where there is a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty stifles investments on both sides. One very prominent example is the famous connected vehicle DSRC 5.9 gigahertz band versus 5G. A very, very religious discussion stifling growth. I mean, I can assure you that as a private sector company and leader in connected vehicle technology, I mean, we couldn't care less which, let's say, underlying communication system we use, what we will do, and similar like other, let's say, companies do, and we, let's say, guarantee interoperability, we can upgrade existing infrastructure, and I think this is what ultimately matters. I think there is an uncertainty created by pending or rulemaking, and this is probably even worse than just making a decision sometimes. So if government gets involved and pull through, make a decision, I think at the end of the day, the technology will find their way one way or the other. But I think underlying, we often, and I'll keep that one short, but it's also a comment maybe on, certainly your question also alludes a little bit to public-private partnerships and investments. I think there is in transportation certainly the room also for PPP models. And I think also as a private sector, I mean, there is certainly a willingness to invest into technologies, but also public-private partnerships are sometimes just understood as free money from the private sector. And I mean, yes, there is a lot of venture capital in that industry, in the mobility, but I can assure you there's nothing like that, like free money. There needs to be a revenue stream attached. Otherwise, those things will not work, and it's an illusion to believe that the private sector will forever chip in just to, let's say, bring new technologies on the road. I think everybody, every innovator, whether it's startup, a multinational, a local, global, let's say, will be very eager and flexible in order to taste out some technologies. But I think in the grand scheme of things, sometimes we need to be facing reality in order to, let's say, bring those PPP models off the ground. We should look at those synergies which are existing, because there can be certainly funding elements, but there can be just know-how on how to make sure a technology which transforms over a 10-year decade can kept alive, operated most efficiently, that leaps in technology will not be at the expense of a government or of the general public at the end of the day. These are things where private sector can contribute very well in order to also, say, reduce inefficiencies in spending.
So, Sean, when you're talking to your entrepreneurs, are there specific federal barriers or ways that they could provide more support or cash or access to pilot programs, or is really the federal government not a player or an issue that any of them are thinking about yet?
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty or need is around policy. So I know sometimes that can stifle the amount of innovation one can do. However, when you think about the different standards and each state has different rules and regulations, in a way it does also make it very challenging on what type of standard can be created, right? So it's a little bit of, the government can stifle the type of innovation, but there's also on the other side that there's some direction that is needed in my eyes. So there's still the debate that, when we finally get to autonomous vehicles and there's an accident, who's liable, and there's no clear answer right now. However, there needs to be some type of leader to kind of be able to progress in that area, right? There's so many different unknowns as there should be, because that's why they call it innovation. But then also, a lot of challenge happens around the companies, especially the startups, where you just don't know where to go because it's case by case as you go to different states. But for them, obviously everyone would want funding and money, that always helps, right? When you don't know what to do with it. But I think the ability to provide the funding that is really going to push a certain level of innovation and new things that people get to see is always encouraged, because the more support you give for one to develop, for one to go outside their comfort zone, and people are, that's why you have incentives for EVs in the beginning, because you really want to push that type of change in the country. So I think the more that we can do for pushing and funding that type of innovation is going to be better for the long run. And I have seen some US DOT grants and things that they are pushing out, because they want the US to be the leaders in it, right? You need to provide money if you really want to be the leaders. Put the money where your mouth is, right? So just more of that is what would help.
So looking around with different states and localities, and Marcus, certainly you have an international perspective as well, who's really getting this right, and how can we bring those lessons to Michigan? So are there countries, are there states, like Sean, when you look around, is there like, oh man, X state is really knocking it out of the park? Or Eric, if HNTV is working with a locality, you're like, man, this city's really thinking it through. Who are the leaders here? And I'd love to hear Michigan-based examples, or if there are people from around the world or in our own backyard who are implementing policies or projects that are really changing the way we look at mobility.
Sure. I think first and foremost, when we look at national leaders in innovative mobility space, we have to look right here at home in Michigan. Michigan is at the forefront of this, is stemming multiple administrations now in terms of how do we keep Michigan at the front of the mobility movement. Detroit is the motor city. How do we ensure that legacy? You look at public-private partnerships like the American Center for Mobility, right, where the state made a big investment in an old General Motors plant to repurpose that brownfield and turn that site into something that provides a ton of different uses for multiple verticals, whether it's a communications sector or the automotive sector, and created a world-class facility that each of those individual companies on their own couldn't create, but together they can come together. They can test their own products, they can run out the facility independently, they can test their own products, they can test things collaboratively. So I think that's a great example here locally. I think there's a lot of great work happening in the state down south, in that little city of Columbus with the smart cities. I hesitate to bring that up in Michigan, but there's a lot of great work happening with the Smart City Grant in Columbus that I think people around the country can take note of. And then Marcus mentioned some work that's happening in Florida, where the Florida DOT and a lot of the municipalities down there, the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County, they're really pushing the envelope on what mobility is. And to kind of tie it into your last question, it's really about what can people do to create the environment to where innovation can flourish, right? And in all those examples, they're creating an environment to where innovation can flourish and can be tested safely, but tested fairly, and trying not to throw up regulation. I think where innovation dies is where we start over-regulating segments and trying to predetermine winners and losers.
And Marcus, when you look around at a leader, where does Siemens see places stepping up? And certainly we'll hear all the great things that Sean's doing, facilitating here to close it out. But what are you excited about when you look around, and what can Michigan learn from the places where you're seeing the most success?
Yeah, I would also first say that I think in Michigan there is such a strong ecosystem, a unique situation with public, private sector companies, different strong mobility companies, whether these are OEMs who are transforming, whether these are companies like Siemens who are transforming, or whether these are very open-minded cities and a very strong state government. I think there are all the ingredients to, let's say, keep Michigan on the forefront. We will actually just announce today as Siemens that we are opening a new office in Sterling Heights, which will be one of our centers where we will build, let's say, the engineering work for the state together with OEMs and the state and local governments in order for the next generation traffic control products. So it is not just a random statement that we are investing significantly in Michigan, and there is obviously a reason. One of the smartest engineers in the country, also from the city side, are sitting in various cities across the state, which is just amazing. And we are obviously very happy also to be part of ACM, where we are trying and failing every day with new technology. So I think that's certainly something to be aware that where we are and what we can do here. Maybe just one example from an international perspective, and just because it's so difficult to replicate, and this is, if you have a city, or in this case I'm talking now about Dubai, right? This is where, because there is a road and transport authority, one agency governing the whole transportation of an emirate. And one of the exciting projects we have done, especially when we talk about multimodality and mobility as a service, is where we have integrated all the various modes of transportation in a city like Dubai in one platform. And we are talking about rail, we are talking about road traffic signals, we are talking about taxi cabs, we are talking about car sharing, we are talking about bike sharing. We have all the data in one platform, and then we are feeding those data in a smartphone app that residents and visitors in Dubai can plan a trip, book a trip, pay a trip in a true multimodal way. This is obviously from a organizational perspective way easier to integrate if you are one agency, you govern all of that, and then you have the ability also to put, give clear direction to the private sector companies such as bike sharing or ride-hailing companies on how to play in such an arena. But the impact and the effect of this system is so strong, and I think this is an example where you could really see this multimodality in practice, and this is why for us it's always very excited of implementing and continuously enhancing our multimodal platform in Dubai. And the fun thing is actually, while especially in the multimodal world, where we are often thinking about how we do trip planning, how do we get from A to B, do we just use Google Maps? It's free, I mean, it's real time, it's there, right? Why did a government like in Dubai, or even here local governments, choose to make an own app? Because at the end of the day, they want to reach out to their citizens, to their commuters directly. They want to get feedback on the quality of the service, whether this is public transit, taxi, or any other mode of mobility. And at the same time, obviously, get a plethora of data which helps them by planning whatever the next extension of a public transit system might be.
So Sean, I was going to say that you get the last word here. And I won't make you compliment another state's economic development group. So feel free to brag about what you're doing or how you're planning on growing Planet M and Michigan's entire mobility ecosystem?
And also to touch on your question too, of course, Michigan, we have the infrastructure, so we are leading the way, right? 96 of the top 100 Tier 1 suppliers have a presence here. There's 18 total OEMs that are here, 2,200 research and development centers that are here. So it's like we have that, but then what's also important is that you have to look to see what's going out around us, or what's going on around us, where, of course, we know the valley's there. Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, they're doing a lot around the data science. But then what we've also done that's very important is that we're going to different countries, and in particular Israel, which has the highest startup per capita. We'll actually be there in June, where it's important to also bring a delegation from Michigan to see what's happening there. And a lot of the companies are already doing that, the OEM, the Tier 1s, but we try our best to facilitate that interaction where we do one-on-one meetings. We try to attract as many international companies to also come back to Michigan. But there's no secret that around the future of mobility, people see Michigan as an essential. Like, you need to go through Michigan in order to advance mobility. Now, in saying that, right, so you have, Waymo that's doing, the first autonomous manufacturing here in Michigan. So there's reasons of why we are an important player, but then it's also important that we continue to look elsewhere and to see what people are doing. KPMG came out with a report on the autonomous readiness. They ranked Netherlands as #1, Singapore as #2, and the United States is #3, right? So things like that, where you understand why is that in the indices and what are they doing, and I'm sure they're looking to see what we're doing as well, but we have to continue to stay relevant. We have to continue to be out there and to just to understand the system that exists and create partnerships like we're already doing and that are up here. But yeah.
And I think this is a fantastic, optimistic way to end this conversation and transition to the governor's remarks, really about how Michigan has taken a huge leadership role here. And while there may be potholes and other issues and water issues that certainly are problematic in the state, that in so many ways you are an international leader on this issue. It's a place where you can grow and really continue to succeed. And thank you so much for joining this panel, and I'd like to welcome the Honorable Mayor Shore up to introduce the governor.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. I get to lead it off, and now I get to do even the more fun part. I get to introduce our incredible governor, which I get to do a lot these days, and I love doing it. So Governor Gretchen Whitmer is a lifetime Michigander. She's a lawyer, an educator, a former prosecutor, Ingham County prosecutor, former state representative, former state senator. She was the first woman to lead a Senate caucus, which I know because I was in the House at the time. I was just a lowly House member and got to meet with our wonderful leader. But more important than all of this, the governor is a mom. And inspired by her family, she's devoted her life to building a stronger Michigan for everyone. Governor Whitmer was elected to the House of Representatives in 2000, elected to the Michigan Senate in 2006, where she served as the Senate Democratic leader. And in 2018, she was elected governor, winning all 83 counties in the primary and winning the general election with 53% of the vote. Since taking her oath of office, she's put together the most diverse cabinet in our state's history and has signed several executive directives, including cleaning up our drinking water, ending discrimination in state government based on sexual orientation and gender identity, securing equal pay for equal work, and expanding opportunities for small and disadvantaged businesses. Governor Whitmer is committed to solving the problems Michiganders face every day. That means ensuring every Michigander has a great public education and a path to a good-paying job. Every community has clean, safe drinking water, and everyone can drive to work or drop off their kids at school safely without blowing a tire or cracking a windshield, something that I think all of you can relate to. Governor Whitmer and her husband, Mark Mallory, live in Lansing with her two daughters, Sherry and Sydney, and her three stepsons, Alex, Mason, and Winston, all live in Michigan as well. Governor Whitmer earned a bachelor's degree and law degree from Michigan State University. She was born and raised in Michigan, and she is honored to serve as our governor. Please welcome Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that introduction, and I am awfully glad to be here with all of you today. You know, throughout the campaign, I became known as the Fix the Damn Roads lady, because as I traversed the great state of Michigan, it became very clear that we've got some serious infrastructure challenges to tackle as a state. And it was made no more clear for me than in a conversation that I was having with a couple of moms in the Detroit Children's Hospital. They were there because their kids were getting treatment, and we had a variety of issues that we talked about, but I asked them, what is the most important issue to you? And each of them said, I just need you to fix the damn roads. Now, I didn't come up with this saying, it was what I heard over and over again from people across our state. But the one mom in particular took the moment to tell me that while she is driving to Detroit to see her child in the hospital, raising 3 other kids at home in Flint, going up and down I-75 every single day, she'd hit a pothole that absolutely sidelined her for a whole afternoon. Cost her hundreds of dollars she didn't have, money that should have been going toward rent or the ability for her to have child care for the other 3 kids at home when she was trying to see her one child in the hospital. That it was a huge setback for her and her family. And every day as I travel our state, I am reminded of not just Brenda and her son, but of the people that I've met who've been impacted by our failure to show real leadership in fixing the infrastructure problems in the state of Michigan. I am incredibly honored to be the 49th governor of this great state, and I take very seriously my job to ensure that we are addressing the infrastructure problems that we are confronting. Michigan has 21% of the world's fresh water in and around our borders, and yet there are a lot of communities that can't drink the water coming out of their taps because of old infrastructure or because of chemicals that have leached into the water. We are the state that put the whole world on wheels, and yet we've got the worst roads in the nation, not because we don't know how to build good roads, but because we haven't been investing in them. And Michigan at one point had the best skilled workforce out of any state around. And now we are woefully behind when it comes to a skills gap where only 44% of our adults have a post-secondary certificate or degree. And all of this means every one of us is paying a price for us not having the foundation that we need to grow an economy and to keep our families and businesses safe and thriving in this state. Every one of us is paying. Now, I ran on a campaign about fixing the roads, yes. I also used a bridge as the symbol of my campaign because I know this. We've got to get back to building bridges together. I did not know when I entered the fray that I would be confronting a Republican-led legislature and that divided government would be an important part of the bridge symbol. But I do know that our great legacy is where we've got leaders who remember they are Michiganders first, where we stay focused on the fundamentals. We can be that state where our families thrive and other people come to for opportunity again. Recently, I was in Lake Orion, Michigan at the General Motors announcement where they announced a $300 million investment in electric vehicles, mobility of the future, right? Doing cutting edge manufacturing and research right here in the state of Michigan. And one of the most troubling conversations I had in that celebratory moment was that the manager of the plant told me there are car haulers that won't contract with that plant because the state of the roads are so bad that they damage the vehicles coming to and from the plant just in picking them up. This is a problem. It is a problem because it undermines our strength in the mobility sector, and it compromises our ability to ensure that we grow this kind of investment, that we continue to be the center of mobility, and that we draw more investment into the state of Michigan. And that's why I am staying focused on fixing the infrastructure problem in Michigan. We've shortchanged our kids' education. We've shortchanged our ability to deliver the fundamentals of state government, all in the quest to simply fill potholes, which means we're not doing any of the three foundational things we should be particularly well in this state right now. When we raise the revenue to actually fix the roads to the tune of $2.5 billion, which is what the price tag is no matter who you talk to, that is the size of the problem. When we do it in a way that is dedicated to fixing the problem and build in real accountability, it puts us in a position where in a decade, not just infrastructure week, but infrastructure decade, we get to 90% of our roads in good to fair condition. But it also gives us the ability to put those general fund dollars back into bringing down the cost of a higher education or a post-secondary certificate or degree. It also puts us in a position where we can fund the education of our children and take us from last in outcomes for kids to being a top 10 state. When we do these things, that is how we strengthen Michigan. That is how we grow the mobility sector. That is how we bring investment into the great state of Michigan, and it is how we keep our young people here. So as we tackle these issues, I want you to know I led with a budget that actually fixes the problem, that is in a way that is dedicated and guaranteed to have the outcome that we're telling the public that they will have. I've gotten across our state and presented my budget from Sturgis, Michigan to Traverse City to Detroit. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know what kind of reception I would get, because coming out with an honest plan to solve the problem, I knew would make people a little concerned. But time, after giving this presentation, people get to their feet and clap, because what they want from their government is problem solving. What they expect is transparency, and what they deserve is honesty. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. Your partnership in this effort is incredibly important. I know that there are a lot of issues we're not going to find common ground on in this town, but if we have one place where we can, it should be around the infrastructure of this state. And that's why you're incredibly important. I hope that you will use your expertise and your connections and your relationships to help make sure that we, for once in a long time in the state, get serious about solving these problems, and we do it together. Because when we do, every one of us in the state of Michigan is going to be better off. I thank you for the work that you do. I thank you for the energy that you've put into this. And I want you to know I will keep gutting it out until we actually solve this problem. And we will work side by side to make Michigan a great place to do business, a great place to raise a family, and a wonderful place to call home. Thank you.
That was a wonderful way to end the day, and I want to thank everybody for sticking around so long and making it through all the panels. I thought the content was amazing. Huge thanks to the Michigan Municipal League for being a great partner with this, and the whole MITA team. And thanks so much for joining us for our Infrastructure Week's Lansing Summit. Have a great day. Go out there, advocate for your roads and bridges. It's time to fix the damn roads. Thank you so much.